We'll do a call meeting to order at 7:10. My apologies for the delay. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to note who is in attendance. I will do that. Jennifer?
Jen Jocelyn, present.
Deb Janik, present.
Brendan McNally, present.
Jeff Karen is present.
Ruth Hollenbach, present.
Jay Edwards, present.
Joe Souza, present.
So who have we missing? We have Sherry is here, and I will call her when she gets back. So Justin LaCroix is absent. And Tom Haley texted me that he is ill. Absent. Sherry is in the back. So other than that, we're all here.
And Jennifer Rash
Jennifer,
is not here.
Sorry. Okay. 17. Okay.
She's missed 2 meetings.
The next item on the agenda is item number 3, and I will read it here. Information session regarding portions of the Open Meetings Act, Code of Ethics, and Access to Public Records Act that are generally applicable in practice to this budget committee. And for that, I'd like to introduce the town solicitor, Giovanni Ciccione. I get that right. Thank you, Gio. You heard all the introductions, I think. We just around the table, so.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to stand for a second as I hand these out.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll hang on to them for those who
I've got
aren't
3
present.
spares, yeah.
Yeah, we got some who aren't
want
present.
to do.
There are some people who aren't present, so we want to, thank you.
I leave 3.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is that all right?
That'd be great. Thank you very
Absent
much.
members.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members. Can I ask, just out of my own curiosity, how many are new members? Okay.
He's been new, but not, he's been on it in the past, so.
You mean new to these types of boards and committees?
Yeah, well, just new to this committee in particular, but yeah.
No,
Yeah, so I don't want to overdo it. I think I'll temper it based on the sense that we have a fairly.
2 of our new people aren't here tonight.
Okay, all right.
Unfortunately.
So I'm the town solicitor, as was said, and I was asked to come and just give you a brief overview of the 3 sort of key areas of responsibility that I'm sure you're familiar with at this point, or at least have heard of. You are subject to these Rhode Island rules and regulations, laws and regulations, including the Access to Public Records Act, APRA, the Open Meetings Act, and of course the rules of the Ethics Commission. And I've provided you in that packet I just handed out with some basic summaries, not that I've created obviously, but the League of Cities and Towns does a very good job on the first 2, and so I've given you their summaries of the APRA and the Open Meetings Act, and I'll just touch on some high points of those. And then the Ethics Commission, I gave you some of their own regulation summaries there, but I have also included for that particular packet, not only their guide, which is a brief summary, but also instructions for the yearly financial statement, a copy of the form of the financial statement that you're required to submit, and the law, the specific language of the law that requires that statement. So if any of you are not familiar with that, obviously let me know, and we'll dig into that a little more deeply, but the forms are there. They're fairly straightforward, and don't require a great amount of detail, but they are very important, and you don't want to miss those year to year. But let me just jump back and talk about AFRA for a second. The general concept is that you report to the citizens of Tiverton. They don't work for you, you work for them, and so they have a right to have full understanding of everything that goes on in meetings of this public body. And to the extent that you all communicate with each other, with the town, on matters of business, those documents that you create by communicating or by voting or by otherwise doing the business that you're doing are subject to public review at any time. So I think that if you approach all this with that sense, life is easy. I don't think with this particular committee there is a lot that would be exempt from the Public Records Act. I think that there are exemptions that you're probably familiar with or may assume are exempt. Things like medical records, student histories, personnel records of some sorts, tax returns that you might file with a state or a federal government. Those are all exempt. But in your capacity, I don't believe you would deal with many exempt records. So I think pretty much anything that crosses your desk, especially in the context of a public meeting, would be a public record. So I think the presumption is always that you are dealing with records that are public. I think more importantly for a board like this, it's the communications that become a question. So when you communicate with each other in the capacity of members of the Budget Committee, please keep that in mind, that those may be discoverable, not discoverable, but maybe subject to the Records Act, even if it's on your own personal email, if you're communicating with someone in the capacity of a Budget Committee member. Those can be dug down and found. What I've suggested to other boards and commissions is that anytime you do conduct business, even if you're using your own email account, it's not a bad practice to copy the administrative officer that is attached to your board or commission. So it may be a treasurer, it may be an administrator. I don't want to clog Jan's inbox. I know he'll beat me around the head if I suggest that you copy him on every email you send out. But when it comes to the practical email, there may be some administrative assistant or some other person that should be a part of those things when you're transmitting budget documents, proposals, things like that. Now, drafts and suggestions, narratives, working memoranda, those things are not subject to the Public Records Act. It's only when you have more concrete documents. But again, the email correspondence, if you're doing that in the capacity of a member of this commission and you're using it to help make decisions of this Budget Commission, then those are in fact subject to the Records Act. So just be very careful about that. I know it has a stifling effect to some extent of discouraging people from communicating by email because they're not sure if it's going to be public or if they have to copy somebody or if they have to save a copy of it somehow. That's an unfortunate downside, but the fact is that transparency is the final goal here. So, and by the way, ask questions as I go along here. I don't want to.
So just a practical question now. So Sherry is our secretary.
Yeah.
So in our case, to let Jan off the hook, if there's something of substance, a document or whatnot, it would be good to copy Sherry. Copy, like if she was on, if the secretary was on copy to any kind of transmission or something, or that would be a good thing.
Absolutely, and
that would make it. That would like stamp it as.
I think you help cover yourself, right?
Okay.
You're helping. It's not that you couldn't go find that email down the road, but what I'm aiming at here is not about the technicalities. It's about the convenience of it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you've already copied the secretary on everything you think is relevant or subject to public disclosure, then that avoids having 3 months from now to have to go dig through your inbox or your sent items to say, okay, did I do anything that's discoverable or that's producible? If you get in the habit of copying the secretary, for example, then you have one repository of those public documents. And when somebody puts a records request into the town can turn to the board secretary and say, okay, for this time period, we have a request. We don't have to go to all of you to ask that question. We can go to the one person who was tasked with putting those in some little folder somewhere in their Outlook, or
Okay.
whatever whatever the mail service is.
That's in a perfect world. Yeah.
Right, and I get that I don't want to let the perfect be
Right, right.
the enemy of the good here, right?
That's good practice,
Communicate,
though,
do
yeah.
your job as a board.
Right.
But I've seen too many times that you end up having to dig through your own personal email,
Oh,
or
yeah.
asking a lawyer or somebody else to dig through your personal email, and you don't want that, right? You want to be able to say with confidence that every time I communicated on town business, I copied the board secretary, and that's where that all is. Search there, and that's 100% of what I did. And if you can say that with confidence, then you're good.
Okay, thank you.
Is the content important? Like, if we're just talking about when to have a meeting, though, we can talk to each other as much as we want with a quorum being
Well,
involved.
this isn't a quorum question, so that's
Oh,
a different issue.
Yeah.
This is just public records.
Okay, public record.
So if a constituent emails you, by the way, that's not a public record. If they say, I'm really concerned about how the budget's going to affect the school, that's an exemption to the Public Records Act. So you're not required to share a constituent's inquiry if you're an elected official, which I believe you all are. Right, so you're not required to share a constituent's inquiry with the secretary of the board as a matter of public records. That is an exemption. But communications amongst each other, even if it's something as simple as a board meeting, I would get in the habit of doing that, only because you never know if somebody says, well, I really want to talk about X, and I'm not going to be able to make that meeting, so can we put it off to the next one? Suddenly you've got a substantive discussion in there, and it may not even occur to you that that was something important. Somebody indicated their feeling on an issue in the context of a meeting scheduling chain of emails. So I would always err on the side of caution there, and to the extent that your secretary tolerates copious emails coming in and having to get set aside, I would think that it's worth doing.
How about information that any one of us as an individual, as elected members, are looking to department heads, to administrators from others? Are those documents, information that we gather, subject to?
If they're documents, yes. So if you sit down and have a conversation, obviously that's a different story. But you're not, under the Records Act, you're not required to compile or produce or create any documents. So if you have a meeting, you don't then have to go and create a memo about that meeting that you had with the treasurer. However, if the treasurer sends you a copy of a budget report from 1973, because you thought that was relevant, then if somebody requests that email chain, then yes, that would be subject to production.
Subject to a request.
If somebody requested, right? Yeah.
But we can have these conversations, like if we have a question for the DBW director, we can call him and ask him, and we're not in violation, or no?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. There's no, so the only, and we'll get to this with the Open Meetings Act, and the question came up before about quorums and rolling quorums. That is everyone's biggest concern. That's a different question, and we'll talk about that at length if you'd like to.
Question,
Yeah.
before you move on from that. So she went and she talked with the department head, then she would like to report back to the committee. She should be reporting back to the secretary, correct?
If you want to report back in writing, then I would do it. Well, I'm not so sure that matters. I think if you're going to report back at an open meeting, you're fine. If,
Well, I'm saying, like, sometimes we want information before we go to a meeting, because we have to make a decision at that meeting, so we might have somebody go out and check something out and report back to us. Years ago, we used to I'd get a phone call, say, this is what I found out. It isn't a rolling quorum if he's just calling me.
no, it is.
Now, apparently now
sorry,
it is. Back then, I don't remember hearing about all that.
Well, yeah, those are
So
sort of a new
How would
creation.
the member report back to the committee before the meeting?
So the member can report back to one other member, right? As long as you don't report back to enough people to create a quorum under that rule.
Yeah.
So if it's just two people having a conversation, that's, you meet in the grocery store and you want to talk about it, that's not going to get you in
How
trouble.
would she report back to the whole committee?
Then yes, it would have to be submitted to the secretary as a component, a part of your board, your agenda packet.
Yeah.
And you put that document in, or you just wait till the meeting and you talk about it here. Yeah, oh no, it's really a
Well,
problem,
if it's
yeah.
5 or 6
But
pages,
if-
and it's.
Well,
If you're fact-finding for yourself, so that you can make a decision, you don't have to share that, am I correct?
Correct.
Well, Sometimes it would be nice.
No, I'm not saying that, I was just trying to
Yeah.
understand, that if I have a question directly for an administrator of something I didn't understand, I can call them and ask them, but it doesn't mean I have to come back and say, hey, I talked to, and,
No.
No, and I think honestly, the only, and this isn't about these rules I'm talking about, I think the only consideration you want to keep in mind is that, be respectful of the town staff's time, right? Because if 9 people come in and knock on the door of the treasurer, every 3 hours during the week, the treasurer's not going to get any other work done, right? So if there is a way to do the inquiry through the committee, that is certainly better. Put it in writing, ask the chair to have a vote, have the secretary put it in an email to the treasurer, get that back. The more you can do that, and again, it's not a violation of any of these rules to do it, but I think as a matter of practice, there's a lot of boards and committees in every city and town, and there's only so many staff people to juggle those questions. So I think that's a different way to think about it, but it's not, you're not violating these acts if you go directly.
Okay, and this actually is something, so I called the treasurer's office to ask for a copy of, because the latest, the audit that's on the website is like 2016, to find out whether or not we could get a newer copy. If they don't have that, but then I'm told that it's on the municipal site, and I go, is that something that I need to, again, she was saying, so it sounds like as long as I'm trying to find something that I wanted to print, to bring in, to submit, but I'm the secretary, so if I go, it's fine. If I
You
can
can
go get
dig all you want,
information.
and, Google is your oyster, right? You can
Okay.
look anywhere on the interwebs, you can, go down any path you want. But if you want to share it, and have it go beyond yourself personally, I would recommend not doing it onesie
Right.
twosie.
So
right?
I
But
send it
just
to
give the
Nancy
whole
Mel and
committee.
ask her for copies, and that's an administrative, so that's okay if I'm as the secretary, I'm sending it to her.
and then it would come in our packet the
Right,
next week.
at the next week, right.
That's right, for open meetings purposes, for public records purposes,
For me, if I send
that's
it to
great, and as soon as it's submitted in those packets, it is now a public record no matter where it came from, right? So even if you found it on the internet and printed it up yourself, if it goes into your packet in an open meeting, that is now a public record, so you're good on that act.
I just want to make a note that the Budget Committee's packet, it's not always clearly defined whether it comes out on 3 days before the meeting, 2 days before, it tends to be the minutes come out 2 days before the agenda, so I just, but I
I'm
mean,
trying
it's
to
obvious
get
that
that.
it's all in prep for the meeting,
For
so
my
that's-
purposes, it's, for these purposes, it's just a question of whether it's in that packet on the day of the meeting, because at that point, whatever's in there is a public record. Even if it's a
Okay.
private, there's a bit of a balance, right? So if somebody finds,
So for public record purposes, I'm thinking more, okay, I'm
for notice
I'm
and all
jumping the
that
gifts,
is different.
I'm
Yeah.
jumping to the other topic, thank you.
So if it's all right, and we can always go back and don't
Yep.
hesitate to ask me, because I know a lot of this blends together.
Yeah, it does.
So Open Meetings Act is really the one that people tend to get gummed up on. As was already asked, like, the seminal case on this is a committee that would, in Pawtucket, I think, that would sit and go to breakfast together before a meeting, so they could sort of get ready for the meeting and have a plan and make the meeting more efficient, right? That was a huge violation, right? That is a quorum. If you have that many people sitting in a room, whether it's in a restaurant, in public, as it is, or you're in a closet somewhere with 4 people out of a 7-member board, those, even a discussion, it's not just sharing documents, it's not planning out a vote, it's not having, getting ready to decide something in particular. If you're discussing matters of substance, in a group that constitutes a quorum, you are having an open meeting subject to notice, subject to public attendance, all those important things. So don't do that, most importantly. The idea is when you're conducting the business of this committee, you do it in this forum. You do it all here together. And everyone who's on the committee has a right to attend or not attend. If you have a meeting with only 3 people showing up, you don't have a quorum, you're not subject to the act. And so you can have those discussions at that point. But don't, that's not the same as saying, I'm gonna call a meeting at, the diner down the street, but we're not gonna tell anyone, and I'm gonna go and talk about committee business, right? It really has to be done in public with the proper notices. The notices have to be published, the minutes have to be recorded, the minutes have to be published, all those important things. And, you know, and there's good reasons for that. I can get into the sort of theory behind it and the history behind it, but I think you all probably understand that, right? It's you're doing the public's work, and the only way to get it to be as transparent as it should be is to have these rules in place. And one other thing I always like to mention with this, you have to publish the meetings in a certain, you know, number of days in advance of having them. You have to put all the content of what you're going to discuss, or especially if you're going to vote on something. Some indication of the substance of that has to be in your agenda, has to be on the notice. You're also required, and some committees, boards don't know this, to give an annual notice. So just about now, this time of year, you are supposed to publish your entire agenda for the year. And so I'm glad to hear that it's been done. The schedule, yeah.
Schedule, not agenda, but schedule.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Meeting
The
schedule.
agenda of meetings, right,
Calendar,
schedule of
right.
meetings, right. Now, those can change, obviously, and if things change, that's fine. But you do have to put one out in advance so that people can have a general sense of what you intend to do for the year. I assume that you don't have a lot of executive session issues here. Yeah, then I'm not gonna spend time on that. There are, if you ever do, for whatever reason, there are specifics that apply to executive session minutes.
I have one question, if I may. So getting back to what we were speaking of earlier, we have been, I think one of the areas that we tend to use is the following. Somebody will do research, or somebody will have something, or whatever it may be, and they want to get it out to the committee. So whether they just, you know, 2 or 3 days before the meeting, send it to the entire committee and write, you know, in capital letters, do not reply, you know, backup for the meeting, do not reply, just kind of so that people have a chance to read it in advance. Not unlike what the secretary would do with the minutes in advance, just, you know, you just get this email, you know, minutes for Thursday night is all
Yep.
it says. So is that one-way communication with, you know, with something that is backup for, I guess it would be part of the packet, but just, you know, it didn't go through the secretary, but it effectively is the same thing. It's just something that's gonna be considered, you know, something that someone wants to get out to the committee. It's a one-way communication to read and then save for discussion when we meet.
Yeah.
Is that okay, a one-way thing?
It's okay, I think it's risky, you know, I
Okay.
think it's okay, it's not, you're not violating the act, but I think you're almost asking for somebody to quickly step back,
reply.
oh, I think this is an awful idea, right? And then
Okay.
suddenly
Okay,
you've both violated the act, right?
Okay.
So, I think going through the secretary, having it in the board packet is always safer.
Okay.
I'm not, again, I don't wanna let the perfect be the enemy of the good here, right? If you think it's valuable to have that set of documents, 5 days in advance of the board pack, or the commission packet going out, then I can't tell you it's illegal to do that. But, you know, the risk you run
Higher
is that
risk.
you suddenly start a conversation.
okay.
Well, okay, I'll keep this quick.
All right.
Last year, in particular, during a lot of our discussions, computers being as pervasive as they are, people would have computers out, be jumping all over wherever they're looking to reinforce their arguments, substantiate what they were saying. How does that work? Does that
This is during a
suddenly
meeting?
become public information? I mean, people would have no idea how to get to these things.
No, the content of their browser history, is not public information. If they reference a document that they read about from their computer as they're sitting there, is not necessarily a part of the public record. Obviously, if you print a document, you hand it out to the committee, that's a different story.
That's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
If you look something up and read it out loud as long as it's in.
you don't have to then print a copy to give to everybody. No, I think that's that's fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
And I think in terms of some of the stuff that we did last time, if someone wanted to have a piece of information, data, charts, or things sent out, we did send it out early, we would discuss it, and then we would have a copy that the clerk would have as the file here. And if it was an electronic document, it could be something that was uploaded to the Secretary of State's office, so that, for the most part, everything that we were discussing that was official, that everyone had a copy of, was actually also posted on the Secretary.
That's what I've been doing, scanning any documents we have and then putting them with the agendas and minutes.
Which is great. I mean, and that's always been the biggest violation, honestly, for especially for boards and commissions outside of town councils and zoning boards that tend to have more vigorous, oversight of these things. The biggest issue is always posting to the Secretary of State. That people forget to do that. They don't know they're supposed to do that. It's probably the largest number of violations that they run across. And so I'm glad to hear that you're already on top of that, and you're probably doing even more that's required than is required, but I encourage that.
Thank you.
Let the Secretary of State yell at you for giving them too many documents. That'll be a first.
Can you put video, do you know, well, that would probably be a question for them. I wanted, if you can upload the video links for the videos if people want more information.
I don't know, you could
The
probably,
Secretary of
you could certainly upload a document that has
With the
a
link.
HTML address or
Hyperlink,
whatever it is, web address for the video link on it, whether you can have a active,
Put it at the
hyperlink,
bottom
I
of the
don't know.
minutes,
That's what I
the
wanted.
video link, yeah.
Right.
It's clever.
Yeah, that would, you'd be above and beyond what most towns do if you did that, that'd be great.
Okay.
But I think that just started this year, that we have to post our minutes. Correct?
No, that's been.
Couple years now.
Yeah, that's been for a while. I can tell you there's cases from 2 or 3 years ago for people violating that. So I can't tell you exactly when
I
it came
thought
in.
we had to do just our agendas and our minutes, and now there's a time frame on the minutes in addition to having to post the minutes.
I'm sorry, so in terms of when you give them to the Secretary of State? Yeah, that may be
Yeah.
the case, right? There's always been a requirement that you do it. I'm not, or there has been for some number of years. I'm not sure if they've tweaked it since then. That may be.
So we have always, the chair would send out the agenda with any kind of supporting documentation, and we've just never hit reply all. We've always, if we had a question, or if, even if it was just like it didn't attach, it would go just to the chair. From the recipient to the chair, this didn't attach, or whatever. Or did you want to add this to the agenda, or something like that? But it was really a one-way out from the secretary to all members, but then it was just not reply all, it was just reply to.
Yeah, I think
And
for a
we're-
practical issue like that, I didn't get the attachment. Don't hesitate to do that.
It's the substance, that's the
It's
issue.
the substance that's the issue.
Would that communication should go to you too, Jeff? Like you first, right? Like if we get something and we have a question, it's to go to you before it goes to Sherry? Not if we didn't get something, but if like we see something on the agenda and I'm like, oh, can this either be added, or I have a question, what is this item? That question should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it's content, yeah, I would say if it's content, yeah. I mean, I'm not the one pushing the button on sending agendas and whatnot. I tend to draft the agenda, but I don't,
That's why.
push the button.
And again, you're not,
If you have a question, it's to go to you, not everybody. Like,
Right.
I would just send it to you and say, I don't know what this is, or can you explain what that is, or.
Correct.
add this.
Feel free to pick up the phone, too.
and to some extent, it's up to Jeff to make sure he doesn't have that same conversation with a quorum of people.
Right.
That's a
Right.
one-way email,
Well,
right?
it
That
is,
would
but
be
if-
me
but if there's
to
5
Jeff,
of-
but not-
We don't understand what I wrote.
Yeah, but if there's
Right.
5 of the same email that come in, and suddenly you're having the same conversation independently with 5 members of your board,
Oops.
you've just hit a quorum, right? So you can have it with 2
You
people.
just have to make sure that you send it to one.
Yeah, just send it to one, but it's up to the recipient to say, I can't, too many people have asked me this question, or you just send out a blast clarifying email, whatever it is, but you don't want to get into these
Yeah.
extensive back and forths.
Thank you.
And let me just say the last point on this particular piece, again, probably for you, this is less important, but at some point in your process, this can be very important. When you violate the Public Records Act, you can get fined, you can get forced to provide the documents, you have to pay the legal fees of the person that challenged you on that. That's a problem, and there's real penalties there. For the Open Meetings Act violation, if you violate that, and then you have a vote in that meeting that was not properly noticed or not otherwise compliant with this act, the action of that meeting is null and void, right? So that's probably not a big deal as you go through your monthly or however often process, but when you're sitting there having to meet a deadline in your charter to provide a recommendation, and you violate the act for that meeting, and suddenly that recommendation, that delivery to the council or whatever, I don't know it in detail, but I think, if I recall, that's what you do. Suddenly that charter requirement is no longer met because your meeting was not properly noticed, right? So those meetings in particular, incredibly important that you don't, give yourself 2 days extra, give yourself a cushion on that. Try not to have 50 emails going around, leading up to that, that could trigger some sort of quorum question. And just try to be very, strict about it, especially as you lead up to those charter deadlines. Because, again, it's just null and void. The meeting is as if it didn't happen. And that's a real problem, so.
Can I just ask a question about the agenda? So we post everything on the agenda that we're discussing so that it's not a violation. So I know that we have certain things that we think we may get to, and so I know the wording you used, Jeff, was like possible. Is that something we should do on, if we may get to that? We may not get to all of these items, especially as we're getting deeper into the budget and voting. But sometimes we do.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're covered.
Yeah, I don't think there's a restriction on overfilling your agenda. You have to have a motion if you choose to defer items on your agenda to the next meeting, or to have a special meeting to catch up, or whatever it is. I don't think you even have to qualify it to say we might get to these things. I wouldn't even do that on the agenda, because that might be, somebody might say, well, I don't think they're gonna get to that, not show up, and then you do get to it, and suddenly they miss their chance to be a public, to weigh in publicly. I would almost, you could certainly put some disclaimer on the agenda that we don't, we don't know if we will get to all of these things by 10:30, and, the chairman's going skiing, so, those things,
But we had, later in the process, when we're getting closer to coming up with our recommendations for what the budget is we did that in the past, I think would be as discussion and possible votes, so that the public could know that we would get to these things. And if we did well, then we were out of here by 10 or 10:30 and all. But it was always clear that when we came to what are we going to vote for the police department budget and taking all those line items, in the agenda that was publicly noticed, it was said that there would be the possibility. At this stage, for the next month or so, a lot of it's information gathering, and so we tend not to have it in the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any chance that you're going to have a vote on something, then make sure it's on the agenda and that there's a clear description of the substance of it. You don't have to go overboard, but it can't just be, generic. It's gotta be, here's the X, Y, and Z things that we're considering voting on, and here's, some sense of how big or important they are, or how much dollars, or whatever you can put in there is helpful.
Yeah, oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Well, let's say, for instance, the tax collector was my cousin. I know when I was on the council, I was voting on her salary, so
Yeah.
I recused myself. I'm voting on her budget. Should I be recusing myself, or am I able to participate in that?
I don't know if I can answer that 100%, but I'm pretty sure my recollection, because that's a conflict of interest question, and I don't necessarily, it doesn't come under this, certainly.
Yeah.
I can tell you that my sense is that as long as it's part of a broader budget, you're not limited. But there is also, I want to say there's some ongoing litigation right now about that very issue. And I'm trying to remember which municipality it's in,
Should
but.
probably
I
just
thought
step
there
away.
was always already a ruling on that. It was like if you were voting for the whole budget, you didn't have to.
That's
If
right.
you were voting on that
Just her
particular
line.
salary line item,
Or
you
line
had to
item.
recuse.
Yeah.
I
Well-
thought there was already a ruling on that.
And there is, and it says that you're okay as long as you're not voting on a particular person's, salary. I think there's a dispute right now, and I wish I could remember the town it was in and the details of it. But it's a question of how, so Tiverton, it's not as if you have a $70 million treasurer's office that has, one person's salary is a small percentage of that, right? It's a significant chunk of your treasurer's budget, I would assume, if I recall from my brief look at the budget. So I think there's probably a fine line there, and if, look, I would certainly take the temperature of the committee, and if you think you could avoid voting on that without,
Well, I was gonna step aside anyway. I
it's
would
probably
just
not,
Rather be safe than sorry.
discretion is the better part of valor, right?
Yeah.
That's probably what's, but I'm happy to look into that a little more and see if I can dig up the most
As long as
recent
you're not gonna
debate.
bill us.
No, look, I unfortunately, the second thing Jan will punish me for is, you know, sending him too many emails and billing him for this type of question.
Just want to grab the floor for 1 minute, Gio. So on the note before Joe spoke, I just want to look at the agenda tonight. So I try to use an action word on the agenda, and so if you look at like 4, 5, 6, and 7, formal receipt would be the action word, receipt would be the action word, sorry. Discussion is the next one. Approval, obviously, that's kind of an action word for a vote. And if you look at 19, scheduling, and then discussion and possible approval. So there's a possible. So, and it just so happens that 19C, 19C is in fact the exact topic that I left it on the agenda from last time because we were talking about when are we going to vote, when are we not going to vote. Remember that whole thing. So this exact topic of how we're going to notice our voting is what we'll talk about under 19C. That's all. I just wanted to kind of point out while we're on this of what I view as action words, keywords related to what's going on with this
So you have
topic.
some that are discussion and vote or discussion and approval, and some that are discussion and possible approval?
I have formal receipt, because we're receiving documents,
Yeah.
discussion of blah, 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 approval of, those are vote minutes, approval of minutes, okay? And then I have scheduling, and then I have discussion and possible approval of rules and process used by committee.
Yeah, I mean, I would, you know, again, this is not necessarily a legal opinion, it's just a suggestion, I guess, more than anything. I think when you have two different ways to you know, your minutes, you're saying approval, like you presume that they will be approved, and you'll presume that you get to that, right? Because they're at the start of the agenda, or that minutes for the most part get approved. But for that more substantive item, you say possible approval. I think that's unnecessarily qualifying. If you're gonna say approval for minutes, I would just say approval for the other item, or a vote.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
if you don't approve, if you just have a consensus, and yeah, and then you just, that's okay.
Yeah,
You don't have to
I just
approve.
hesitate to have a citizen say, well, it's at the end of the agenda, they say possible, so maybe I don't have to go, maybe it'll be on the next, you know.
Okay.
You don't want to give somebody the wrong impression that somehow it's less likely, when in fact, if you get through your agenda, you're gonna have a vote and you're gonna move it along, just like
Okay,
you would the minutes.
and in that case, though, and just so I understand, as sitting in this chair, so discussion and approval of rules, and blah, blah, blah. So if we do have a discussion, and there's really no need for an approval, we're okay, we don't have to take a vote, right?
Well, you vote to approve it, right?
Well,
I'm not sure I
Or
understand.
maybe not, I mean, I'm just,
No, you don't have to,
I don't know
right.
where this discussion is gonna lead.
No, I would say discussion and vote. You know,
Okay.
a vote for approval, or a vote, you know.
But what if there is no vote? I'm just asking the question, like, what if we discuss it and there's no need for a vote?
That's fine.
Is
You
that
don't,
okay?
you can always
can
overpromise in the
overnotice.
agenda,
You can
right? Yeah, you can
overnotice.
overnotice, you just
Okay,
can't undernotice.
I just wanna make sure you can
Yeah,
overnotice, okay.
and my concern is only that if you.
You're not
if
gonna
you-
get somebody upset for sitting all night because you
Yeah,
overnoticed.
yeah, right, no, that's right, that's right, and my
Okay.
concern, and I know, it would probably be good for folks in terms of their time management to know if you may not be getting to things, but I think you're running a risk there.
Okay,
Um,
okay, well, I learned something, all right. So if you see that before we post,
Got it. Yeah,
ding me.
I will
Thank
thank you.
So I don't mean to take up so much of your time in this long meeting, but the last item in the packet is the Ethics Commission Guide. Again, this one comes right from the State Ethics Commission. You may not want to read all the details of the other two packages that I gave you, because those tend to be applicable to a wide range of bodies, and a lot of it, I don't think, will apply to what you do here. But with this guide to the code, it's only 4 pages, and if you don't, and it's actually a lot of white space on those pages. It's a very brief overview. I think it's worth reading. I actually plugged in one more item in addition to what they put on the website, which is the financial disclosure paragraph at the bottom of the first page. Again, it's not that I think that you have a lot of compliance here or a lot of issues to deal with. It's sort of like a one and done each year kind of thing for the most part, for most people. But when you do it wrong, it's really bad, like it looks bad.
Ethics also sends this to you, right?
Yes, yeah, they should.
Say you have up until this date to get this in.
Yep, and it's online, you just go right on the website and you plug it in. I printed them up just for conversation, but, you know, again, it's 4 pages, it's light reading, I would read that,
If you're already in there, you can just do it electronically, it'll say has anything.
absolutely, does
It's
anything
gotten
change?
much
This
easier.
is-
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
this is
gotten
not
much
hard.
Does this still apply? And you just go down.
I just, just don't think because it's easy, it's not important. I guess that's my only message with that, right?
So they'll send us something saying when it's due and.
They'll send you a packet.
Okay.
They send you
Soon,
like this,
April,
yeah.
April, I think.
But, you know, remember, even as candidates, these rules start to apply. So don't necessarily, you know, assume. It's not, if they fail to send it to you, it's your fault, not theirs,
And they
right?
just made all this
It's not,
public.
you don't get out of it.
This is all not public, too, because
Oh, yeah.
before you couldn't open it up, and now you can.
Oh, no. So, and, yeah, that's an important point, actually. That's a really important point. Once you send this in, just so you know, somebody can type your last name into the Secretary of State's, the Ethics Commission website, and your reports all show up in a PDF, right? So it's all right there. But it's not like the congressional disclosures, right? It's not every stock you own and every, you know, it's a bit less detailed, I guess. But it is still public, so, you know, understand that that's part of the price you pay to be a public servant,
And
is
not just
that
you, your
disclosure.
spouse and your family, your kids and your family.
Yeah, that's right.
But my recollection is that the wording is less onerous in the last few years, and that the wording at this level, anyway, seemed to be focused on if the asset or investment did business with the state or the municipality. That was the key. I mean, if you own some Vanguard 500, they didn't really care about that
Well,
as much as they cared about, you know, if you own something that was doing business with or
Is it through the
that type
same
of thing.
state that does election stuff? Because if that was,
Yeah, but some of it was, if I remember right, it was like, do you have an auto loan, do you have, like, you didn't have to disclose your mortgage, but you had to disclose like any lender.
yeah,
It
you don't
wasn't
have to give out the
student loan
amounts, you don't have to
debt,
give out
it
the
wasn't-
payments, but you
You
have to
had to
say,
say
I've got
that you
I've got a Chrysler financial loan, yeah.
Right.
Oh, okay. So I don't have a car loan, so maybe that was easy for me. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah,
and
there was no more onerous thing, you know,
Yeah,
there's
I know.
almost, there was almost nothing in there that isn't public knowledge already.
Right, they just wanted to know where you were employed and where
Yeah.
your
Right.
spouse was employed.
So you didn't have to put your mortgage and stuff like that?
No, your primary home, your
Oh,
primary
okay.
home you didn't, if you had a secondary home, then yes, you
You did.
did.
I think the only one that sort of, you know, for me can get, and again, maybe it doesn't matter, but there's travel reporting, right? So any travel over $250 that you get from somebody who might have an interest in the budget of Tiverton, in this case, you know, that's something you have to report. So, you know, I'm not sure whether that would qualify, but, you know, a lot of times I think where people get hung up, a nonprofit, you know, public interest group may say, you know, it'd be great if the Tiverton folks went to a how to be a great budget committee member meeting up in Boston, and we're going to buy them lunch and we're going to teach them how to be, you know, super budgeters and teach them about bond, you know, and pension amortization and, you know, all that kind of good stuff. And you say, well, that was just, you know, me sort of learning. It was educational, but really, it's probably hosted, you know, secondarily by, you know, all the people that issue bonds. Or loan money to towns and all that. So it's definitely, those kind of things are worth reporting. Do them. You know, if you think it's valuable, do them. Just report it. I think my office put my cards should be in those folders. You know, as I said in the cover letter, feel free to, you know, ask questions. Generally, you know, if you can do them through the committee or through Jan's office or something that would allow not just you to get the answer, but all of your colleagues to also get the answer. That's usually the most helpful way to do it and the most efficient way for the town to manage all those inquiries. But whatever the process, don't hesitate to ask questions. That's what we're here for, and we're happy to do it.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you,
you
Jill.
very much.
You're welcome to Tiverton. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so, the next 4 items on the agenda are essentially the same, and I'm gonna try to do them in 4 minutes. Number 4 is formal receipt of preliminary municipal budget request. I just wanna, since that's a charter item, I wanna make sure we receive it. I believe that this binder would be it.
It's in the very front, Luce.
It looks like it's it. I'm gonna look at the administrator. Is this our municipal budget request?
No, most of that is the backup.
The backup, okay,
The budget submittal itself is in the front.
In the front of the binder.
okay,
No letter.
got it. Okay, and this is the email that I saw come across yesterday, and I had emailed out to the committee. And this is the initial one. Fantastic. And then here is the budget as we know it and see it. And here's the capital. Okay, everyone got one? We good? Official? Okay. So, that being said, I don't think we need a vote. We all know we got it. And we'll do the next one.
I
Yes,
just,
Joe?
can we have a little discussion about what we were submitted? Just for a moment?
Yeah, I was gonna, at some point, I was gonna, I guess on number 8, I was just gonna dig in, but that's fine. What did you wanna discuss, Joe? Sure.
Well, I was a little disturbed at the increase in the budget and the fact that it's like 3 times the cap. So I don't know how we can accept this. I'm not even sure that we could. I realize that, but I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but, I mean, to be honest, we have to accept it, we have to discuss it, and then we vote. I mean, you can't reject it and say, oh, I don't want it.
But this
Well,
isn't
I don't know
final
that. I mean,
number
can we
either.
make a motion to send it back until it's,
But wouldn't we
Under
do
the
that
cap.
after we looked at it
Af-
and looked at what line items needed to maybe be
well, I don't
suggested
know. I already
to?
read it because I got the email and I read it online.
That's, we can't, it's illegal.
But I'm,
Right, but don't you want to look at it and say what we should suggest that be
We're the
cut?
ones deciding. so
well,
we're
this
just
is the thing.
discussing
I don't think
exactly.
it's our responsibility to cut a budget from 12% down to the cap even. We shouldn't even be submitted a budget that's exceeding the cap.
The council is still working on this budget.
What is this then?
This is a
Yes,
draft.
it's a draft.
I realize it's a draft, but we shouldn't have been submitted something that exceeds the cap like this. I mean, 12.6%? Oh, my
Was it
God.
submitted because of the deadline?
So,
Probably.
is this mine or is this yours? This is mine.
I
So-
just never seen this, okay? I've been watching this
I'm not-
budget
Mr.
process
Souza, I'm
since
not ye-
1990.
Not yelling.
Well,
We're having a
you know,
we're
So
having a
can I ask a
discussion.
question of you?
It's just
What-
crazy.
What has gone on in the past? What is the kind of percentages that you would see come across?
Well, I mean,
I just want ideas of what happened in the past.
well, we've had, when we had the financial town meetings, there were times when we exceeded the cap because we had major, problems in town we had to deal with,
No, I
so.
mean, when it wasn't the financial town meeting.
But
Okay.
never was the budget put in where it exceeded the cap, by 3 times right off the bat,
Right. I didn't, yeah.
Say this. None of us have had a chance to read this thing.
Don't say none of
front
us,
to
I've
back,
read it already.
probably.
Oh, I've looked at it.
We've looked at it, okay. Do any of us know for certain what particular items caused us to go to this level? Probably not. I'm sure the town administrator is going to explain to us. I think a lot of it was his capital improvement plan. So what we need to do is accept this budget, not approve it, not say we like it, accept receiving it, and then get on with our job of diagnosing it, massaging it, and trying to make it better.
Well, I'd just like to be clear that when you're gonna go with a capital budget like this, generally, the projects that are shovel-ready, we've gone out and at least done an estimate. This is all pure speculation. I haven't seen any estimates done for any of this capital. I know some work was done, to look into the roads and get a plan together for paving. That was done by the DPW. I'm not sure what they did to do it, but I know I'm looking at it, so some of that, as far as paving, yeah, but these projects like seawalls and things, we haven't even gone out to bid on any of that. How can we put a number on it? And that's the biggest problem I have with it, is it's, let's just throw money up there and then we'll go bid later on. What if it comes in higher than the bid? Or even lower? We'll go, we're spending, we're putting money up for nothing, so I have objections with this budget. And I would make, I'm not sure if being a form, I guess, would make a motion to send it back to the administrator. That'd be in form of a motion, looking for a vote.
think we're not approving this budget, Joe.
I know we're not.
We're just saying
I
we
don't wanna
received
receive
it.
it.
Right, but it's
My
so far
motion
out
is
of
not to
line.
receive it, to
It's
send
not
it
our
back.
job to cut it back down. That they should come in at a reasonable level to start out.
It's not our job to cut a budget like this and look like we're, trying to chop the legs out from under the town. We need a responsible administrator to come forward with a budget that fits, within what the town can afford.
Yeah, but this is a draft budget by the charter that needed to come in by the 15th. We have a very unusual circumstance this year where there's money coming in from the casino.
Still a cap, and we just had a
But there's
vote.
nothing in the charter that says that what has to be submitted has to be below the cap.
Well, maybe you should understand what state law says,
Maybe I should, but you understand it, that there's something in the charter that says someone has to submit a budget that's
Every
at
budget
or
has to
below
be
the
under the
cap?
cap. Every budget has to
A
be.
I look at
draft?
precedent, I look
Yeah,
at what's
a draft
happened in the
also.
past in this
Why
town.
would you start with a draft that's over it? That's my question to you, to Brendan. What's
Be-
your reasoning?
The reasoning is because this
reasoning.
includes a 5-year capital plan that's anticipating a significant amount of revenue coming in so that we could do long-term planning in terms of capital projects. We haven't approved anything. I think we're crazy, we're not going to accept receipt of
I
a
don't think
draft
crazy
budget.
is something you should be calling anyone, but I think
I'm
we're
sorry?
you said it's
No, I'm not
crazy.
calling a person crazy, but the idea
said
that per
crazy.
charter, a draft budget submitted and we won't even
We're
receive
just
it?
discussing it, that's all.
Okay, I
That's all.
just want to grab the
And-
floor, I'm sorry.
And I'm discussing as well, saying I think we should receive it.
I just want to grab the floor for a minute. So it's my understanding, and I was not there on Monday night, but it's my understanding that this topic came up at some level in the council meeting, and that this budget went before the council prior to it coming to us, and that there was a question of whether or not the budget was to be, and correct me, please, anyone from the audience, needed to be approved by the council before it came to the budget committee. And so I think the wording, if I understood it right, and I'm working off memory here, but the wording in the charter was that the municipal request is to come from the town administrator to the budget committee. That's my memory. I believe that's accurate. And so then there was a letter that came out dated January 16th, and it says, "Dear Commissioners," it's in the packet on the top sheet, and I think this sort of puts a cap on it all. It says, no pun intended, "This is a follow-up to my transmittal letter." It's from Jan, from our town administrator. "This is a follow-up to my transmittal letter dated January 14th at the request of the town council. The town council wants it made clear that it did not approve that request or my sending it to the budget committee." So the council, and I think that's clear and consistent with the wording of the charter, that the budget comes from the town administrator to here, and the council wanted to be on record that it was not approved by them, because of course their approval comes later, sometime around early March. So I just wanted to sort of state for the record what I think are the dynamics that occurred Monday night. I was not present, but I believe those are the dynamics that occurred. Is that close to the truth? Okay,
Yes,
I'm looking
I
out,
was there
thank
too,
you.
yeah.
So I'm not trying to necessarily to exaggerating, I just wanted to state what I think happened. And so, obviously, this already sort of came up in terms of probably related to the size of the numbers, what prompted that reaction from perhaps the council.
Aren't the council still having budget workshops? Like, these numbers may be very different when they come through from you all, correct? All right.
I'm gonna, the town administrator asked to be heard. I'm gonna use it as an opportunity quickly to grab a glass of water. Go ahead, Jan.
Just a few things. Under the charter, the way I read it, and by the way, I was pretty much on my own trying to figure out what it required me to do. By no later than January 15, I had to submit the preliminary municipal budget request to both the budget committee and to the town council. I did that. The town council, or at least some members, I think had knowledge of past practice where they thought that only, that budget goes to the budget committee after the town council votes that it's okay to go to the budget committee. As far as I know, that's not in the charter, but there can be different opinions about that. So that's where that letter came from, that some of the members of the council felt that it had to be made clear that they didn't go through an exercise of reviewing it, discussing it, and sending it to the budget committee with the council's approval. So what you have is simply what, in my opinion, the charter asks for, which is that as a town administrator, I submit a preliminary budget request. And actually, it's not only the municipal budget, because we were lucky to be able to work with the town clerk and the treasurer, and so their requests are in the same document. If I may quickly about how ridiculous this is or not, and whether it exceeds the cap, it's my understanding that the cap applies to the tax rate, and that it cannot go up by more than a certain percentage. What is before you actually doesn't need to exceed the cap on an increase in the tax rate. And I'm trying to make that clear. It may be difficult because it's perhaps unusual, in part because this town apparently never adopted a real capital planning process. But looking at capital needs as a category in and of their own, in terms of what the town needs are and to what extent they need to be either urgently addressed or addressed more longer term. That's what this does. If it can be paid for by revenue other than tax revenue, it does not necessarily have to result in an increase in the tax rate. That, together with the circumstance that there is a significant amount of new revenue coming in, justifies, in my opinion, that we look at, can that new revenue be used to address what I consider to be rather significant needs in the town to deal with infrastructure and other problems. And as I see it, that you could actually use the casino money for that purpose, and that it would not have to result in an increase in the tax rate. Otherwise, I wouldn't have submitted it.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jan, and I come quickly to a point where if we start talking about, it's actually the tax levy, if we get to that point, we are quickly at a loss because we don't have a statement of estimated revenues. So I would be, and I don't want to get off topic and off agenda. We were just trying to move through these 4 items in 4 minutes. Jovially, I say that.
totally agree with you.
But when I guess the question, it begs the question of how soon, I know the council per charter provides an approved estimate of revenue, you know, at the same time, was it 63 or 73 days before the FTR, whatever that time is. That's down the road so far. But you being our administrator, you know, in order to quash or quell some of what Joe has shared, how soon could you produce an estimate of revenue, even informally?
Well, and I'll answer that question. What I would say about the need to quash, I question that. Anyone can make all kinds of accusations, but it doesn't mean they're true. I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's my opinion. So I'm not necessarily going to try to counter each and every accusation of
Okay.
that nature. When I developed, and actually, I'm sorry that it's a very long transmittal letter, but it certainly explains that when you do something like this, you don't do it without at least trying to have some general understanding of what revenues might be available, or what funding might be available. So I've done that to the best of my ability. That doesn't mean that anything close to even a preliminary estimate of revenues is available. That's because the people who work on that need input from a bunch of different sources, and not all of that information is available yet. But we have a general idea. I didn't want to put something on the table that I would not be able to explain how it could be paid for. I believe we can do that, And also, we will try to expedite as much as we can, with the town council's approval, getting estimates of revenue out.
Excuse me. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So as a new person, so is this normally the point in when the budget committee asks questions, or do we, or is it normally later in the process after we get the budget?
Normally,
I know everybody does presentations, so I'm sorry, excuse me. I wanted to find out if this is normally the time when you would do those kinds of questions, or if it's later.
Why is this increase?
Right.
What's different this year? Or even too, when we go through the revenue, where did this money come from? Why is this money down?
Okay.
Where, you know, those are when we start to pick it apart, and we do go through.
But is there
Yeah,
going to be
I
more of a presentation on the town
I
administrator?
think, so, you see where number 8, yes, that's where number 8 is, number 9, number 10, that's where we do that.
Okay.
I was just being anal and said, well, let's formally receive them and be proper. And I didn't anticipate that, the 4 minutes would be 40, but that happens. Right, so I was just being formal. We need to receive these, and, and I was just being formal, so, yeah. Right. Mr. Coulter? Mr. Coulter, I'll recognize you.
Thank you. Good evening. Robert Coulter. I'm a resident of Tiverton and also on the town council. First of all, I just wanted to congratulate all of you. I haven't been here before on your service to the Budget Committee. I was on the Budget Committee myself, and I think it's a very important role, and I can see you're warming up. And I just wanted to explain or confirm that the process here at the town council level is I'm in complete agreement with Jan that the town administrator under the charter submits his preliminary request, and there was some debate about that at the town council level, but I support the interpretation that he has, that is his submission. And the town council has had one focused workshop. I expect there to be at least 2 more. I can't guarantee that, in February and March. But what I think I heard from you before is that the town council has been neutral on this, and I think the important thing to remember is that the revenue estimates have not yet, as I understand it, been presented or formalized or blessed. So the tax cap, which I am quite familiar with, is on the levy, right, not the expenses. So without the revenues, you really don't know what the formula is going to be. It's on the levy, not the rate. And much like at the town council level, there was some dispute. I supported the position that it was not appropriate for the town council to block or approve or assert that it had a role in preventing the town administrator from presenting his honest assessment of the budget. I would respectfully suggest that you should likewise receive it. That's not to say that you approve of it, although I do think it would be appropriate for you to insist on revenue numbers, which is certainly something that I think we all share the view that need to be coming up. I can't guarantee it, but I am just one person. I'm hoping that we have another workshop the first Monday in February, which I think you would see more color on that. So I just wanted to, and also, one other thing I would say, and again, just one person, but working with Jan, I think this is his first cycle, full cycle anyway, doing this, is just putting on the table a list. It's a long list, it's a big list of the capital needs of the town through his eyes. That's not to say that they can all be paid for, it can all be paid for at once, but I would like to support the effort that he's taken, at least putting it on the table. We can't afford everything, it might take a long time, and I'm not saying that's even a vote of the council to support of that, but in my conversations with Jan, I have encouraged him to be very sort of frank and candid and just tell us like it is in his assessment of what the long-term capital needs would be of the town. And so I just wanted to share that, that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Coulter, President Coulter. So, I was
What do we do about the motion?
Joe has a motion on the floor.
Wasn't seconded, so
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Joe. With that, and I'm going to look to guidance from perhaps somebody to help me through these documents. Number 5 is formal receipt, and thank you everyone for the constructive dialogue on the last one. Formal receipt of preliminary town clerk budget request. Mr. Administrator, has that been inserted in the binder?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Part of that main budget document.
Right, and I see it's time-stamped, Town Clerk's Department Summary Sheet, FY 2020. Here it is, it's got a nice tab, beautiful. And thank you for taking care of that. 2 sheets, does everyone see it? Everyone got it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Number 6 on the agenda is formal receipt of preliminary town treasurer budget request. So, let's look at number 6. Let's see, is there a tab here?
I need Jan to come help me do binders.
That's also included as part of
Yep.
the main
Okay,
budget
it's one of the,
Okay.
it's one of the third time you go to the top row of tabs. This is great, thank you, Jan. Should thank Mary Lou, I guess, right? Treasurer's Department, okay. It's got the signature on it, it's 1 sheet, wonderful. Everyone got it?
Isn't it?
It's a top tab, it's one of these
Oh,
top
that's-
tabs that starts up, nope, right here.
I see it now.
There you go.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, it's like it's the top tab row, third top tab. 1 sheet of paper. Everyone got it? Okay, so that's the official receipt. And number 7 is formal receipt of the preliminary school department budget request, which I believe was a document that was not in this binder, of course, and it was a sheet of paper which had a colorful T on it.
Yeah.
It's dated January 11th, and it's time-stamped January 15th. And it's several pages. The second page is the superintendent's name, and it's got a third sheet which looks like a PowerPoint slide with 4 bullets. And I'm not going to read the number. Wow. I'm not going to read the number because I just wanted to receive it.
This was their whole, this was their budget. Oh, they do a presentation too. Okay.
Okay.
see the
So,
revenue.
anyway, does everyone have this? Okay, so we'll formally receive that. So, we have completed agenda items 4, 5, 6, and 7. Great. And agenda item number 8 is discussion of debt service. And for that, I'd like to rely upon the expertise, certainly, of the treasurer. Thank you. Does everyone know the treasurer?
Good evening.
I've seen her, but I
Is this
don't know
on?
her.
Hello? How you doing?
Denise, this is Sherry.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi,
We had an
Denise.
email exchange
Yep. Thank you.
earlier.
I just want to make sure that we're looking at the same documents, so,
Did you pass out the document I gave you last?
last week I did. So
Okay.
are you looking at the large one that looked like upside down stairs? Yeah, okay, I'm going to find it now. So, the floor is yours.
Okay, so this document, it's sorted by maturity, so you can see the bonds as they're maturing. At the bottom, I had done a little analysis for someone, I think over the summer, just to see where the town, from 1999 forward, how we have added to our debt service. All of these bonds, right now, have been refinanced over the last 5 years. So the rates that we are currently paying are very competitive. There really hasn't been much of a shift over the last few years. We don't have any opportunity at this point to refinance anymore. It would have to be a few more years before we were able to do anything, and the interest rate environment would have to go down, because typically, especially for the ride bonds, they have to, they participate in the refinance, and they typically, just like a home mortgage, want to make sure that to go through that effort, we're going to see some significant savings. So they have benchmarks on how much we would save if we did it. So these payments are pretty much cast in stone. We always budget the gross amount of the payment, even for those bonds that we do receive reimbursement, the library bond, the school bonds. We still have to book the gross amount because that is what the town is on the hook for. The reimbursements generally do come in as they have been promised. This year, there's a little bit of play in the school reimbursement, because the reimbursement is going to be determined based on the percentage of completion of the renovation as of 6/30. So I don't know, so I'm looking at Sally, and she disappeared.
I'm on the building committee. Will be done by March.
Of this year.
Of this year, it will be fully complete.
Fully complete. So we have to work out the details of the reimbursement as of 6/30/18, because that's what they look at, the percentage of completion from last June. So it was not 100% complete, so the reimbursement schedule at 100% does not kick in.
So last week, when we looked at this, the document that we had for the library showed us how much money we were getting reimbursed from that. Will we get that during this process for the schools as well, so that we can see how much, we obviously see how
Well-
much is going out, but can we see what's coming in? Because that all goes into the general fund, it doesn't
Yes.
necessarily go directly to the bond.
Right.
But I think it's helpful to know how much money we get back.
It's included as revenue,
Okay.
just like the library.
But we won't know on that one until the school
Well,
one until
I have an
March.
estimate that was prepared a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And I usually, they don't typically give us this amount of detail, but last year, they made an error, if you remember. So I kind of hit them up to get a lot of the details. So right now, if we were 100% complete, we'd be looking at about $1.2 million.
Coming
Coming
into as
in.
revenue in this, for this budget.
For the 2020 budget.
Okay. And then another three, am I right with the number 306 from the library? So we're at
309.
1.5 being reimbursed?
309 for the library.
309, and then, what did you say, 1.2?
1.2.
So we're at 1.5 and coming into the revenue stream, in addition to the other things that we got.
That was starting in a year?
This budget that we're deciding,
Oh.
this budget coming in this year.
Sorry.
That's what I just,
So the
yeah.
100% was, we didn't quite make it last year.
It's
That's
last
what it
year,
was.
but that's what I
Missed
wanted to
that.
know, if it was coming into this budget that we're deciding.
If we had 100% as of 6/30/18, we'd be getting 1.2, but we didn't have 100%.
So we're,
So that piece of it, I don't know, but it's,
Oh.
that's,
Some fraction of the one.
some from, okay.
Well-
Is there a way, well, once they're finished in March, will they give us that number?
the
Yes, and
new,
there also has to be a determination of, there's different rates of percentage that we get back. There's 35%, and then 39% for certain
Certain
areas.
items,
They have
yeah.
to deal with handicapped accessibility, health and safety issues. So I'm assuming that will come in some form of a document that we'll be able to check and balance as the payments come in.
Okay.
unfortunately, they're always behind. And they haven't even done the audit yet, right? They'll do an audit. Like the library came in and they did a full audit of all of the spending on the bond. I mean, soup to nuts. And then they issued their reimbursement schedule. And that's what I understood would happen with the new school bond.
The state came in and did the audit, or the library
The-
board did it?
OLIS. The
Okay,
OLIS
so
did.
then RIDE would come in.
So, yeah, I understood that RIDE would come in and do a full audit of all of the spending.
And that's just on the new one. Are there other ones that we get still any reimbursement on, or no?
Oh, the 1.2 million is all of the bonds.
All of the bonds?
All of the bonds. So we're getting reimbursement on all of the bonds. The newest one was roughly going to be about 495,000, 100%, but since we're not. So the numbers, you know,
Do you think it'll materialize in the fiscal year that we're deciding? Because if you're done in March, then it will go into the fiscal year,
I hope so.
but not guaranteed.
No.
What has their payment schedule been like in the past?
Well, when they stick to their payment schedule, and we've always received it. However, like when we did all the refinancing, we had to go back and adjust because the payments, the interests, all of that changed. They actually had to adjust because they overpaid us. You know, there was that time frame where they're on schedule, but they haven't caught up to the refinancing, and I submit all of the documents to them, telling them what the new payments are and everything, and then they have to recalculate, and that was actually where we found an error last year. So they're always behind a little bit. So they might give me the scheduled amount, and then when they go back and do the audit, adjust the following year, because
So I just want to make sure I understand it right. So the 490 is the new loan, the 490 would be the new loan, but the other ones were already on a
They're all-
schedule.
they're-
So
yes.
out of that 1.2, take out that 490.
800,000,
That
yep.
money is guaranteed.
Yes.
It's really just the 490, we're not sure what the schedule
we're
will
not sure.
be.
Right.
Okay.
So do these reimbursements normally get paid late, I mean, after the revenue is reported for the budgets? Do these normally come in late? Or, I know you said this is a little bit later than normal,
You mean
but-
the estimates?
Right, the estimates, do
Well,
they normally?
unfortunately, we usually get a recommended budget from the state around February, March. I actually got one today for a few of the municipal items, like the meals and beverage, but it's the recommended budget. I'm going to say 85% of the time, when we actually get the enacted budget, it's different, and it's usually lower.
Okay.
So, and it's always after the financial town referendum.
Okay,
So what we're working with when we put the estimates together, you know, we want to rely on those numbers because that's the only number we have from the state. But they have come in different
well,
historically,
that's why I
yes.
was kind of wondering how, if you just guess and put that number in, or whether it's it's kind of like counting your eggs before they hatch, you know? I just
It's an
wanted to-
estimate based
okay.
on the information we have at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Many times, we'll get revised and enacted numbers for school aid in June, which is already, you know, we've already passed the budget. Fiscal year 19, they were off for over $100,000.
It's just new to me, maybe this
Yeah.
is the way, they just do things.
A lot of the revenue, you're making an educated guess because you're not guaranteed, you don't know.
Right,
Like even
what-
too, when we talk about, we don't know how many ambulance
Right.
runs we're gonna go on and how
Or if
many-
everybody's going to pay taxes, right?
Yeah,
Got it,
exactly.
okay.
Right.
Got it.
It's an educated guess.
Revenue in April, I believe it is, right? The state, the revenue estimates come in April, up there.
That's just a lot of money.
Right, and even too, when we talk about schools, we're deciding the school budget, but we don't have the enrollment numbers
Yeah.
yet either.
It's just a
It's
lot
not
of
for,
money.
it's an educated guess.
I just want to note one thing for the committee. In looking at the town administrator's budget, which is the inside pocket, the stapled sheets, I'm looking at the first sheet. So I see grand total debt service 4773965. And I look on the sheet the treasurer has provided, and in the gray stripe for 2020, all the way to the right, I see 4773965, the same number. So.
Thank God.
What's that? Yeah, no, I'm just making the point, because that's just like a sanity check. I said, well, I'm going to check with the treasurer and with the, so that's on the same page. So And what led me to think that was just that these numbers come down and, you know, the administrator comes before us, and so all of a sudden, there could be some week where we get handed a budget from the administrator, and this could change. And
These should not change, the debt service.
you don't think they will?
No, the debt service shouldn't change.
Okay,
The only thing that might change is the revenue, the reimbursement side of it,
okay.
but
The
not the debt.
schedule won't, okay,
No.
okay.
Question, am I seeing that, 3 bonds are paid off this year?
What are you looking at?
Yeah,
Well,
there was a question. Yeah.
it's not
I
that
was
they've been
looking.
paid, right. So Pecasset
Okay.
got
All right, so
refinanced,
when we okay.
so,
Picasso's down the other side.
You did say that last week.
right, right. And
Wishful
sometimes,
thinking, I don't know.
sometimes it takes a couple of years for
Yeah.
a refinanced portion of the bond to actually get paid off. Depends on,
When we did that, Denise, there was a huge savings to do that.
Yeah,
to
there
roll
was.
that rate.
Mhm. Oh,
I
yeah.
forgot what the number you threw out last year, but it was-
Thousands.
it was millions we've saved. Potential savings too, in the future.
Okay.
That's why you make the big bucks.
So, we just heard from the treasurer that these numbers won't change. So, with that comment, does anyone have any additional, we have the reimbursement rate, which is up in the air, we get that. Does anyone else have any further questions on these numbers? If we move on to the, I'd like to move on to the next item, which is item number 9, the municipal capital, if there's no questions. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think that you're going to address the municipal capital?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's going to address it. That's why I organized it that way. Thank you, Denise.
So
I'll let you
I'm
go.
assuming you have the same schedule?
That's that one. It's
Yeah, my God.
backhoes and whatnot.
It is sorted by maturity date. So you will see that well, actually, next week, we'll be paying off the first Mack truck, and then in July, the backhoe. So we will be paying off a few of these by the end of June 30, 2020. The top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Top 5 items will be paid off.
So they won't, but they're gonna be paid off on the budget that we're already out of, so really, we're looking at anything that says 20,
Anything before 6/30/20.
630, so we're really starting at the.
Second to the
Fire truck? Is that really what we're,
well, 7/15/19,
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
that falls
So
in that
will-
budget,
that will
right.
go down.
The
And
backhoe
are the
down.
2 Ford, are those the 2 new ones that DPW said we haven't gotten yet, but are
Yes.
coming in?
Those are the
Okay,
ones that were approved last year.
okay.
So, you weren't here last week, but I brought up a question about this. So when we look at, opportunity, we can't pay the bonds off early, but we can pay these off early and not incur these interests. Like, one of them, $65,000 just in
That's the street right.
in interest. So we can pay these down and avoid some of those expenditures that
Yes,
are
we could.
astronomical.
But you'd need $500,000 to do it.
But you could spread that out. You can still lower, like, even if you didn't pay the whole thing off, you could lower the principal and then you'd pay less interest, correct?
I would have to get back to you on that because
Or the
these are
loans could
set
be
up.
refinanced if
Well-
we paid a portion of it?
We would have to find something that was going to pay, that 2.78%. So you want to make sure that we're going to see the savings. I mean, if in the budget you appropriated funds to be put towards these purchases, you'd basically be prepaying it. And you could eventually, you would save on the back end.
Wouldn't it
We're
make,
looking at like almost 118,000 just what we're paying in interest.
That's over time, not in
Yeah.
1 year. That's over time.
Yeah, but to me, that's just.
I have a question, Denise. So it's better to pay off early earlier in the loan, correct? It does better, it does more good, correct? It
Oh,
saves you
more
absolutely.
interest.
So then we definitely should consider that as early as we can. Not all of it, to pay all of it, but a portion of it, like
But look,
like Jen's
look
saying.
which ones are gonna cost us the most. I mean, you might not wanna pay the one that has
Right, one-
No, the
$686
highest
in interest
percentage-
left, but
Percentage and the highest amount, yeah.
percentage.
Just
right.
prioritize it.
Yeah. That sounds good.
But in order to pay them off, you would have to appropriate those funds in the budget.
Right, so we wouldn't have to pay all, just portions of it we can do too.
Well, I'd have to look into what the
Okay.
portions would be, so that we don't violate any.
Okay, that would be great, thank you
Yeah.
so
I
much.
don't know about the streetlight conversion, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I just want to follow up with the point that the treasurer's made, and I think it's, I'm going to maybe, if it's the same point, or maybe I'm just going to push the point a little further, and just say that, sometimes when you hear we're going to save it on the back end, or when you do this, what you're effectively doing is taking a tax efficiency now, or a tax dollar now, and throwing it at something now, and the savings comes 4 years later. And so that in my mind, I often, if that's maybe what happens in some of these cases, if it does, or in a pedagogic situation where that may happen, I do question the fairness of that. So, because, you have to ask, you're taking a tax dollar from someone now, maybe they sell their house in a year, and then the benefit's given 3 years later. So and it's a very intentional type of thing. So I just question, in some cases, you can look at things that way. And so coming up with the $500,000 now, yeah, we solve a problem perhaps, but I just question the fairness of that perhaps.
Are they paid monthly?
No, annually.
Annually?
That's all. That was just a comment I had on that sort of thing. And that applies to the bonds and all these conversations that you hear over and over again, so.
I mean, the bonds, we know that there's nothing that we can do with. When I just look at the vehicles, I go, we could save that money and possibly roll that, because going forward, I mean, I would hope that the idea is that we don't continue to accrue this kind of debt and these kind of interest
Well, that's
payments
what I
over
was going to
time.
say, is wouldn't it make more sense? I mean, some of these are pretty low interest rates to just, continue, and obviously, if there's one that's, really high, then maybe look at paying it off, but keep these the way they are, and then in the future, just try to make a plan to buy them outright instead of financing them.
I will give the floor to the administrator for a moment.
I just want to explain that this discussion we had in part as well. And the confusing part is here that we're talking about municipal capital, and we also have another capital budget. They're both capital. And why I'm saying that is because you do ultimately have, or we all have ultimately, a choice how we spend some of the extra revenue that's available, and it could be spent on the capital items that in its separate capital budget for capital improvement or capital equipment replacement, or it could be used to reduce the debt in the debt service category. So that's still, I think, something to consider, which I think is a good discussion to have. When you do it, you really need more input and advice, I think, from the treasurer in terms of where does it make sense to consider that in terms of the interest rate, like you mentioned, but also what the agreements say. Not every agreement is worked out the same way. So in some instances, there are penalties, in other instances, there are not. So it's a pretty, you need to be very careful with it. But I do agree that in principle, this is an option that can be considered and probably should be considered. I didn't do it because I knew that this analysis, we had this. And I felt strongly we needed the analysis on the other capital needs as well, so that at least it's on the table. But in the bigger picture, you sort of need to say, well, what if we didn't do this particular capital item here, but we paid off, say, the street lighting program? That's certainly an option.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Edwards, please.
Quick question. question. So this sheet that kind of ranks them in maturity shows an annual payment right in the middle of the page, right? 381,000. Right? If you carry, should that carry forward? So I'm looking. We're on page 1 of the docket, right? And then we move to the top of page 2, and the request is 340. What's the difference?
The very first one at the top, Brendan, is getting paid off in a week.
There's a couple of.
Yeah, she said.
41,233.
One was paid off in April, one's gonna be January 22nd. and
It's
then the,
4
the
that
third
expire,
one is the
yeah.
one that's gonna be paid on this, in July, but will already be on the budget that we're.
Yeah.
So we don't need it for the 2020 budget.
So if we pay anything early, it will be reflected that very next year, correct? If we paid something early, then, actually, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, please.
Oh, yeah, Joe?
Well, I'm just, I'm thinking, when I'm looking at the number of snowplow trucks and things that we've bought recently, this town had started a policy where we were using private snowplows. The town would basically have the big trucks and the sanders, and we were hiring private plows, 1-ton trucks, pickups to go out and work with our trucks to do the intersections, the small roads and things like that. And somehow that policy has shifted now. We're buying a whole bunch of trucks. We're buying brand spanking new trucks to put out in the salty sand. So I know I'm not on the council, but I do criticize the way this has happened. And that's part of the reason why we have so many leases, is the policy was changed from using private vendors. Now, I asked about this, and I was told, well, insurance regulations changed, so I checked into it. And they really haven't changed now, but the towns now are enforcing. It's been in place for many years that if you're plowing snow, you need what's called plow insurance. And some insurance companies sell it by the storm, goes by the mileage on your trucks. You pay by the mile. And others, I guess you can just buy a blanket policy. But the bottom line is that I would suggest the council adjust the rate that we're paying to private vendors. We saved a lot of money not having to buy, $50,000, $100,000 trucks. So like I say, I realize I'm not on the council, but I see some council members here, so I'm hoping that they're gonna look into this because, like we were going through, see a 10-wheeler dump body. We're buying a dump body. We have a rock truck. It was an older truck that we use when we move rocks. Okay, so it has an old steel body on it because it gets beat up when you dump boulders in the back of it. Now we're buying a new body for that truck, and they said, oh, by the way, we're gonna put the old body on and make a landfill truck. And I'm thinking, we're gonna close the landfill in a year, and we're building a truck to go back up to the landfill. We have a truck up there now, it's a little smaller, they want a bigger one. So I'm really questioning where we've been going the last couple of years on some of this spending. We didn't need a dump body. We didn't need to buy 2 smaller plow trucks when we could have used private vendors. Bottom line is, I think, we're stuck with this spending now. It's been done. But in the future, we really need to, look a little harder at where we're spending. And again, I think we need to cut about 10% out of this budget. So I think this whole discussion of trying to pay off some of this debt early is mute. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Joe a question?
Yeah.
Where did you find out that that was not true about the insurance, and who lied to us about it? That's what I want to know.
I didn't say anybody lied. I just
Okay.
said that what I was told wasn't clear, so I did a little
No,
clarification.
but we were all told it was insurance, was one of the reasons.
Well, basically what was stated was that the vendors didn't want to do it because they couldn't make enough money because the insurance was so expensive. Like I said, Rhode Island already requires.
It went up for the private
I asked
trucks.
this question at the
Yeah.
DPW site tour, and what I asked specifically to the DPW director was, in the past few years, have they had less people that they were able to hire for private plowing because of the insurance change? And his answer was, yes, they had less available vendors. That was specifically what I asked.
And I agree. And I did say that the council might need to adjust the rate a little bit. Insurance always keeps going up.
Did you
know,
have
Rhode Island, it's high anyway.
contracts?
Alls I'm saying, though, is like, when I worked for a company, when we plowed on the Navy base for years, we always had to have that insurance.
Right,
And we had to record the mileage on the truck, so it wasn't like we bought the insurance.
But I don't think anybody lied to us. It was a
Yeah.
specific question that was asked, and for what his input
Yeah.
was, did they have less available vendors that they were going to pick from? And his answer was yes.
Yeah, what I think I was told, we were told, is that it went up significantly at one point. That's,
Well,
I just want
it's
to make sure
not-
that.
Yeah, that, I'm gonna
I
say
mean,
maybe
the
3,
bottom-
5%.
However it works, they have less vendors to call up and say, can you please plow the street?
Well, that goes
They
to.
still do.
Then again, I would question how they advertised it, and have we really adjusted the rates in the last 10 or 12 years? So, something I think, maybe I'll go, ask the council to look at, but in our budget, I'm hoping that we're gonna have enough money there under private plowing, because when you can get these guys with the pickup trucks that can get up into some of the tighter roads and things like that, it works out a lot better than having to buy a $50,000 truck. Costs a lot of money to maintain the trucks, and then they rust within, you know what I'm saying, in the salt and sand, so. It's easier to just hire somebody during the storms, in my opinion.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so the comment that I appreciate the most, I think, is from Jennifer from last week about and what was pointed out again tonight, that so many of these are gonna fall off in about a year, this year and then next year. So that I think is real positive. So just, if nothing else, if we do nothing even, that they paid off, and that, I think that's a big win. That's just my comment, if I wear my Mr. Default hat. Any other comments on this item?
Just a short comment on, it's great that they're falling off, but if you look at the years that they started here down in the gray box, you've got 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, 10. So we've had a lot of new bonds constantly.
Those were voter-approved bonds, were they
I'm
not?
talking
I'm
about
not
this
talking.
document.
Oh, I thought you were talking about this one.
I was
But-
speaking specifically of the
Yeah, but
No.
they're following,
capital,
right.
this sheet.
But in reference to the
Right, I understand.
bonds,
But I'm just
those
saying,
were
I
all-
think that's my comment, is that I think we need to be careful getting into big bonds in the near future. It influences our budgets for decades, and it's a lot of interest, that's what we're all discussing. It's very, very harmful to do too much borrowing. That's even on a household level, so
Am
that's my opinion.
Am I correct that these are all voter-approved
Yes, they
bonds
are.
that
That's
all
the
went to
difference.
the residents, that they
no.
they approved the spending?
I understand, they're voter approved. That doesn't mean that everybody has to agree with the concept. So I'm just stating it's something that can even hurt the town if you're not careful. That's all I'm saying.
Any other comments on the capital item? The municipal capital, number 9 on the agenda? Okay, I'll move on then to the town treasurer's budget, which I believe is in the binder. We received it. So go ahead, Denise. It's, again, it's, where's the third tab at the top, for those who are looking? 2140. Go ahead, Denise, you got it.
Well, my budget in our department is relatively stable year over year. I think I have a 1.27% increase. Primarily, the increase is in the payroll processing and the GASB OPEB consultant fees. I think it was about, we have to do that report every 2 years, for, it's a requirement of GASB, but it also goes into the financial statements. And the company that we work with, has allowed us to pay it over 2 years, so that even though they're doing the report every 2 years, I kind of just stabilize the cost of it. I budget half for each year, and then I pay him half, and then the other half the following year. There's been significant increases in the requirements. There was 4 GASB changes over the last 2 audit cycles, so that they had to adjust. I had to go back to them, and, I mean, they were prepared for it, but they had to provide more information, and the fee went up. However, I think it was 2 years ago, I just did a straw poll of the municipalities in my area and who they used for their reporting and how much they paid, and we were actually paying the least. So I stuck with, I was thinking of, all right, maybe we need to go out to RFP, but I decided to stick with these guys. I mean, a couple $1,000s less. Portsmouth was paying 14 or 15,000, we were paying 11. So I was pretty happy with that. But it's not to say that we can't go out to RFP and, you know, see what we can do. But those are significant portions of my budget. Everything else stays relatively the same. Should probably point out that we have reduced the size of our staff. I did have 2.5 people, now I only have 2, besides myself, over the last few years, so we're doing more with less.
Finished all your computer upgrades, Tom?
Pretty much. We're in decent shape. We did get a new server last year, or
All carbon paper?
no more carbon paper. I do have a printer that's 17 years old. No, it's actually was the printer that we printed checks on. But we moved over the last year into pre-printed checks, so we no longer use it, but I'm saving it just in case. We have a copy machine that, you know, I think it came from Jim Gonzalo. So it doesn't do color, doesn't staple, you know, it's adequate. And we'll use it till it dies. But we usually kind of get the hand-me-downs from upstairs, so. Any other questions?
So the for the GASB reporting, the 6,500, that's for the budget we're working on right now, we should anticipate 6,500.
The following year, yes.
The last one was $10,000, that's why that.
Actually, it was a little bit more, and I had to scramble around. I had only budgeted 5. Let me see.
Great. So the 65 is the first of 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I did this. 18 was 39 I had budgeted, and I paid him $45.50 because I knew the following year was going to be more, so I scraped together what I could at the end of that year and sent them some more money because I didn't have enough.
We had a question last week, we wanted to ask you about the restricted account for the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
Did you remember the number?
Oh, yeah. Right now, what's the closure at? Is that what you're asking me?
What's in the fund, closing fund?
7.9 million.
Boy, I wasn't even
What'd you
close.
say?
I thought it was 10.
Yeah, no.
7.9.
I thought it was 6.
I'm thinking about the place
7.9.
that closed it, and I guess something came in at 10 or something.
7.9 million.
Bad, though.
No, I mean, it's grown steadily every year. We've been able to put in, last year, we put in $441,000 in pay-as-you-throw bags. Every year, except 2013-14, we've done over 400 grand in pay-as-you-throw net. So,
Well, it's working.
it's working.
I always wondered if Jay Lambert was gonna be right. Remember, we used to put the 100 and some thousand in every year. We quit doing that. He told us that would ruin us. We're getting close, we'll find out.
We'll find out.
Does anyone have any more questions about specifically about the treasurer's budget?
Nope.
I'd like to thank the treasurer, not going to leave, but I'd like to thank the treasurer for such a tight number. Thank you very much on that.
I have awesome staff,
Yeah.
by the way.
And
shout out
for
to them.
taking the hand-me-downs. So,
We laugh about it.
if there's no more questions on that, then I'll move on to the next, item, which is also going to be delivered by the treasurer, the discussion of the audit of town accounts. So every year, of course, we get audited, and I believe that audit usually comes out about this time of year, doesn't it? We get
It
a
should-
big fat book or a disc
Yes.
these days?
Yes, there was a snag with RIDE and the validation of the UCOA file for the school,
I heard about that.
and we just had to file for an extension till tomorrow. We got it today. So I know our auditors are working on getting everything filed by tomorrow. So once that's filed, then we'll have them come in and do a presentation. I'm sure as soon as I can get it to the town administrator, and usually the council receives it, approves it before it becomes public. But, I mean, as soon as it gets to the state, it'll be on the municipal website as fast as they can put it up there, so.
Typically, given where we're at, I'm just kind of curious, given where we're at right now with I don't know how long the delay added, but is it, from where we are now, is it usually like a week or two, or 3 weeks, or a month, or just kind of based on history? I don't know how much time this
It's
delay
usually
is.
just a couple of weeks that we can get the auditors in and on the agenda,
Okay,
but it'll be filed tomorrow,
okay,
so it's all good news,
okay, good.
so.
All right, well, you know the numbers. Okay, good. So why don't we talk about that now? There's obviously a company that does this audit, and you're going to talk about that.
We're in the second year of a 3-year contract. So for next year, the total budget was $44,000. Typically, we split that with the school, but the last couple of years, I've asked them for a more detailed breakdown of the charges, which they did give us in this RFP. And the thing that varies is the single audit portion of the audit, and I know you don't have this document, but last year, the single audit is typically involves, like 90% of it is the school. So the school has picked up a significant portion of that cost. So like this year, the year we're in right now, the budget was 22,000, but my bill was only like 18 something, because the single audit had nothing to do with the town. So the school department picked up that portion of it. Next year, I can't really tell you that, but the budget is 44,000. So I think conservatively, we should still stick with budgeting half. Because the single audit changes over time, what they look at. So we have a budget of 22,000 for next year.
Okay. Okay, and you may have just said it, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but what year of what are we in with this company?
Second of the third.
And we try to, are we in the practice of changing every 3 years? Or
went
is
out-
that mandatory, or is that?
It's not mandatory. We went out to RFP 2 years ago,
Yeah?
and they were selected. They were the low bidder. They were the firm that was here before, so there's a possibility that they could change. We've had firms longer than that, but I haven't, 8 years, I've had 2 firms. Well, actually, 3,
So this firm will have been there for 6 years.
yes.
So yeah, there might be some impetus to move, yeah. Okay, I just kind of wondered about that, but we're in year 2 of 3 now. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions, on this item? One question I had was, they used to publish a book. Is it all just digital now for,
No, they still will give us, they give us 30 hard copies.
okay,
Well, that's all I usually ask for, and distribute them to you folks, the council, and we have some for the public, but nobody ever comes. to get
okay. So would each member of the budget committee get one?
them. Yes.
Fantastic, great. My memory's getting short. Okay, great, awesome, thank you. Well, we'll get it after the council receives it and all that.
Yep.
We got them last year.
Great, awesome. And I assume the disc, the audit will be digitally online too?
Oh, yeah.
We'll get Mr. Robert to put it up there
And
somewhere.
Sherry, I apologize, I didn't realize that 2017 wasn't online.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I found
It's
it
Dave
on the
Roberts' fault.
municipal site.
Okay,
One quick question. Are we still issuing paper paychecks or?
We have probably 40 people who request paper paychecks.
Yeah,
But for the most part, we issue electronic.
by contract.
We can't force them.
I'm sure by contract or something, we can't force them.
We can't force them to-
EBT card, huh?
And
Even if they have direct deposit, they still get the
they still
the
get
statement.
a statement, yes.
The paper that you get, it's got
And
no money in it, but,
The
you know,
truth of
they
the matter
they
is,
still
it's
get
all,
that.
it's all built into the fee, you know? So we could tell them, we're not giving you any more paper, and it doesn't necessarily mean the fee's gonna go down,
Yeah.
because it's all bundled together.
Well, you had talked about the old printer. I was wondering what you were keeping.
No, I don't print paychecks.
Do they each,
It's all, I know, you privatize.
so, like she's talking to us tonight, does he do a presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
he's gonna do it next.
Any other questions?
I think we're good. Are we all good? Thank you very much, Denise.
Welcome.
You have a good weekend.
You too?
Um,
My friend was up in
And
He's one of the guys that only has an ATM card.
I would now like to, if somebody would like the microphone, I will recognize briefly Mrs.
I'll be very
Black.
quick. May I? Thank you. It's Mrs. Hunt. You asked a question about the bonds, and I just wanted to say, you asked if they were all voted on. And in 2002-3 is when Mr. Karen and I started this journey with the TIF bond that was not voted on by the people, the $8 million sewer bond from down to Fall River from what they called Starwood at the time, and part of it went to the industrial park. So that was $8,295,000 bond voted on by the town council. That's why they put that piece in the charter, that you couldn't ever do that again after this happened.
We can thank.
And the other piece is, I was going through my archives, and I found this 2003 audit. In those days, you had to go have it printed. They'd give you a copy, and you paid to have it printed. So now I'm glad I'm on the school committee. I hope I can get a copy. So the other piece is, those bonds that you saw, 3, 2, 3, 4, that's all one $30 million school bond for 3 elementary schools. They were built in different years. I didn't want you to think we went out every year for a different bond, okay? That was a $30 million bond to build Ranger, Pecasset, and Fort Barton, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
And just a note on that 2003 Charter Review Commission, John Foley came in with a head full of steam on that specific point to change those 3 words, I think it was, on that, so that the TIF couldn't happen again, yeah. So the next item on, thank you, Sally. The next item on the agenda is going to call the most wanted man in Tiverton to the podium, the tax assessor. Discussion of tax assessor's budget. Mr. Dave Robert. Trying to inject a little humor, but didn't go over too well.
I appreciated it, because it's true.
Hi, Dave, how are you?
Good evening, Jeff.
This is,
and members of
this
the
is
Budget
Sherry,
Board.
a new member. This
Hi,
is Dave Robert.
Robert.
Hello, Sherry, how are you?
I've heard a lot about you.
Welcome. All good things, right?
So Dave, I'm gonna look in the document binder that Jan put together. Or, that's the backup, I'm gonna look in the stapled one first of all.
It's a lot of paper.
Tax collector, so it'll be on page 4 of Jan's document, I guess, right? No, there is no page 4, wait a minute.
I have it listed as page 4.
I think I got dealt a trick deck.
This just doesn't, it didn't print. Oh, you.
Trying to pull a fast one on the chairman. No problem. We can share, Ruth. Okay, so it looks like it's page 4, tax assessor, middle of the page. Take it away, Dave.
Good evening. Mine's pretty straightforward, as it typically is. The increase request this year is just about 1%. Most line items are even funded, or requested to be even funded, except for 2, and excluding the salary line item. So if you wish, I can go through every single line item, or if you have specifics about the increases, I'd be happy to answer those. The increases are on the website hosting. Last year, we budgeted $2,500. That was actually my error. It actually should have been $3,000, because that was the charge that they charged us this year for the web hosting, is $3,000 on an annual basis. So that's just a correction. The other increase is on the software maintenance. I do anticipate that we're going to have roughly a 10% increase of the maintenance fees of the software that my office maintains. But the bulk of that money is also for a PC to be replaced. We have an aging fleet of machines in the office, and one of them is starting to give us a little bit of problems. So we're looking to replace that one machine. Correct.
So I have a question right off the bat. Is that 6,500, is that reflective of some of the amount that I witnessed the council, perhaps in the first meeting, vote for some sort of a $20,000-ish, after the election, $20,000-ish transition to service-based software? Is that part of this, or
That was police and fire.
Right, that's separate.
that's separate? Okay, I just wasn't sure. That was police and fire, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
So my $6,500, that is for, we have a tax administration software piece, which is separate from the treasurer's office, but they kind of work together. So what happens is, in my office, I have an appraisal software package, typically known as CAMA. It's for CAMA, which is for computer-aided mass appraisal. So that software is from Vision Appraisals. That information, everyone's assessments and the account information gets rolled over into tax administration, which is where we maintain personal exemptions and such, and motor vehicle database and the tangible property database. That then rolls into Tony Lynn's system for the tax collection. So once we go through the process of issuing tax bills, which is generated out of the tax administration system, it then gets rolled over into the collection system, so that when people start paying, she can process those payments to their proper accounts. So there's 3 pieces of software. That 6,500 covers two of those pieces.
So that just allows them to talk to each other and
Correct.
update each other.
Correct. Right. So in the past, Jeff would probably be most familiar, and perhaps the software used to be known as Opal.
Yeah.
All right, so it's now all under the umbrella of Vision. Vision bought out Opal. So the three pieces now, technically there's four because building official also has a piece. They're all under Vision now,
That's scary.
a little bit.
No comment, right?
Well, you know me, I'm always a straight shooter. I'm not happy right now with a lot of the Vision issues going on, so, yeah,
We won't go there at the moment.
all right.
So, does anyone else have any questions? I brought that up about the last line item. Anyone else?
And I'm sorry, if I may, just while we're still on this budget item, I am anticipating a 10% increase of the Vision software annual maintenance. They typically do mail out a quote early in the year, so once I do receive that, I'll update the budget committee with an updated number if needed.
Where does that live in your budget?
On
that
the
part of
65,
software?
that's part of the software maintenance.
And so what would a 10% increase? would
It's,
that make-
it's already baked in there.
Oh, it's in
So,
there.
right, it's already
So-
in there.
All right,
So
you baked
if
it in.
they turn around and the anticipated increase is 10%, but if it comes back 5%, I'll update.
We get a rebate? Nice.
So,
Brendan?
Just a quick question for staff. I see there's no increase. Is that, this is a union position, is that the position that there would be no increase, or is this one of, under contract negotiation?
Under contract negotiations.
is that for your position and the other staff, or just no?
My position, there is a increase in there. The other is a union contract that's being negotiated this year, so it's not part of the line item.
And I'm sorry, and again, I'll apologize. Are we to the part for your salary yet? We just
Yeah,
finished
it's right
off our
there.
meeting?
Oh, well,
Okay, we already flew through it. Can I just quickly
It's a
ask?
2%
So you're
increase.
no, but so you do the IT and then you do the tax assessor stuff too?
I was mainly hired for the tax assessor. I do IT. The work around here that I do for IT is out of the kindness of my heart.
Okay.
I do get a stipend for updating the website.
Okay. All right, that's what I wanted to know.
Right. But my main focus is tax assessment.
Okay.
yeah, I was going to ask, so those are there's the website with the small stipend, and then there's the IT, put the fires out,
Correct.
whatnot, and then there's your core job, so, okay. And is that are those the three responsibilities that, I don't know, from time to time, if you had even more hats than that, I don't know, but.
Yeah. I would take a little bit of exception with the IT being my responsibility. It's just something I help out with.
Okay. Fair enough.
So, the staff salaries, they're in negotiations now. So if that changes, that would go in the contingency line for the council? Okay.
And Dave, on the computer that is defunct, how did that come about? I mean, are you the one who is saying that it just can't be repaired at all? Is there any,
Well, it's
makes the decision?
It's at its life expectancy. So computers, personal computers, are generally 5, 6, 7 years. The one that we're looking to replace is about 6 years. So it's just a matter of faster processor speed. So they're so inexpensive now, computers, that it just wouldn't make sense to bring it out and have it repaired.
Thanks, that's good.
Sure.
Can I ask a question about the staff salaries? How many staff members is that?
Currently, my office has one full-time and one part-time that I share with the tax collector. So it's half-time in my office and half-time in tax collections. So between the two offices, there's 3 full-time clerical staff.
I just want to commend you, Dave, on the completeness of your backup. I don't know if, I don't know if everyone else has, it's the first one I flipped through line by line, like page by page.
I do thank you for the recognition, but it is, I believe everyone has this type of backup, and it's something that Jan had put together.
That's great. So I do have a question, though. I'm just curious, like, what are you trying to show in this picture from the GIS? It sounds like,
That's a picture of your house.
Yeah.
I thought it was for a minute.
Right, what's your address again, Jeff? So actually, that's just kind of demonstrating the value of having GIS in town. So not only is the GIS a good tool for the planning department, the building officials office, and my department to utilize mapping services, but it does pay in other ways, and this is just a demonstration of that.
Oh, they put an addition on, is that what that is?
Right, so that was actually some work done without a building permit. So we were able to just, discover that by spying the sky. Right.
Not my house.
I take it this is more update than Google.
All right. So actually, this is through Google. Right now, the GIS service that we utilize is a company called Main Street Maps, and they pull different aerial photography from RIGIS, which is at the Rhode Island College. So there's different map services, but one of them is actually Google Satellite, and this is actually a Google Satellite image, because actually Google Satellites get updated at least on an annual basis. So this is something where I was doing a map of this local area, and I just happened to glance at this property and, right. So this is actually one of the things where we'll actually utilize this a little bit more heavily in late end of calendar 2019 and 2020 when we're doing full revaluations. Because what we'll also be utilizing the GIS system for is to import values that we can take a look at on a map basis instead of just paper. So we can look down in a neighborhood and using, different color schemes, I can tell whose assessments are increasing at certain rates. And if I have an outlier, it'll be a different color. So immediately we'll get a lot of feedback through that reevaluation process. So it's going to be a really good tool to have.
So I can see the future where you won't have to do it by eye, but it will be a comparison that's automatic, of
Yeah, there's
the
actually a
old and new.
company called Pictometry, which is now called actually Eagle View, and it's expensive, but on an annual basis, they'll actually fly over a town, and they can detect changes in building footprints.
Okay, thank you.
There's an overlay to see.
Yeah.
And this is not your area, but, and also to tell if people build too close to the lot line, which
Right.
happened to my neighborhood.
Right.
Okay.
You leave your trees, lots of trees.
Want to keep it moving, so is there, for Mr. Roberts' actual budget, are there any further questions regarding his actual budget? I note Mr. Robert is slightly higher than treasurer's. Just kidding.
Slightly.
Giving you a hard time.
Well, I work harder.
Okay.
You better have an escort when you leave.
A little bit of payback for her earlier comment.
She's gonna give you that old copy.
Remember, he brings money in.
Okay. Any other comments? We can move on? So the next item is item number 13. It's discussion of motor vehicle phase-out.
Okay. Oh,
So this was a document that the taxes...
Jeff, if I may, I'm sorry. I'm not sure. Typically, I also handle the revaluation right after my budget, so I'm not sure if you have it somewhere else in your agenda.
I do not. We could take a motion and add it if you want to go through it. We're good at that.
I'm fine with that. If-
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to add revaluation, the reval to the agenda.
Second.
Someone second it, please?
I move the question. Second.
Second.
Okay, you're going to vote to add that to the agenda?
It's only for discussion.
For discussion,
We're not
yes.
voting on it.
Yep.
Yeah, not voting.
All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Do we have, are there motions? It was moved by Joe, seconded by Ruth. Unanimous vote. Revaluation. Let's discuss revaluation, and it's, let us orient since we weren't ready. It's in, I assume it's in the, it's, okay, the backup would be in the binder, under a tab at the bottom. It's one of the bottom tabs. Take it away, Dave.
Okay, so again, the members who have been on the committee previously would have had me present a case where we actually wanted to fund revaluations on an annual basis instead of having a sticker shock all at once. So several years ago, came to the budget committee and we started setting aside monies into a restricted account. Based on the schedule of 3-year revaluations, based on my estimates, we determined that $53,000 on an annual basis would cover the 2 statistical updates and the 1 full revaluation on that 9-year cycle. A couple of years ago, there was discussion that they may change that 3-year cycle to a 5-year cycle, and then a 4-year cycle, then back to a 5-year cycle. So it kept on going back and forth, but they were going to extend it under one of those 2 situations. Last year, the Lieutenant Governor really put a big push on changing it, so I came to the Budget Committee thinking that we should lower the annual appropriation of $53,000 down to $40,000, and I believe last year might have been $45,000. So that extending the revaluation from 3 years to 4 years or 5 years, that conversation's kind of died down now. And it looks like for sure it's not going to be brought up this year. So just to be on the safe side, I'd like to get back to that cycle of the 3 years because that may never change. So I want to get back to that $53,000 annual appropriation. However, this year, I am asking $85,000, and the bulk of that is $30,000 will be going to an outside appraisal for the power plant. As you may know, the power plant currently has a pilot agreement with the town of Tiverton, and it's a payment in lieu of taxes. That agreement expires in 2020. So we need to have an outside firm who do these type of appraisals come on in, and right now I have some rough estimates that an outside appraisal firm will cost roughly $30,000. Just for that one. Right. So I did have some conversation with the Lincoln tax assessor. They did go out to have Twin River appraised and also Amica. And each one of those appraisals for those facilities ranged anywhere between $20,000 and $25,000.
Do you have any idea what the return on that would be? Like what the general idea of what the kind of tax revenue that property would bring in?
Currently, on the pilot program, it's bringing $800,000 a year.
Do you think that'll be a
And the idea,
So-
increase?
the idea
so-
is that was a tax treaty / break,
Right.
is the concept.
So we only go up.
Right. So
So this is a restricted account, so even if
It's a
it comes in
restricted
less, the
account.
money still goes back to the.
Yeah.
it goes back to the restricted account. So I have really no idea on what the appraisal is going to come in at. But if it was to come in roughly around 44 million, we would be getting that 800,000, so it'd be a wash. But again, I couldn't even venture a guess of what the true value of that facility is.
Will they be doing their own as well? Is
I-
that, is that
I-
part of the process?
I would imagine they would.
And then on what we hit them at, they might appeal it, I guess.
Right. Well, these type of things, we also have, we have a good relationship with them, so I'm sure we'll work out something where they actually might be agreeable to pay for some of this. But I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not sure if that'd be the case or not. But in some cases, I've heard that they would share their expense. Not necessarily them, but other facilities that gone through this type of process.
The expense, this number.
I'm sorry.
You mean the cost, this
Correct.
type of a cost associated with, okay.
All right.
How did you, like, put out an RFP for that? Where did you advertise?
We haven't yet, so we would have to put something together. So I would probably have a lot of conversations with the town of Burrillville that has the other power plant in town, and see what kind of process they went through, and probably mirror pretty much their RFP.
Are there other properties in town that have these type of agreements, or is this just?
That's the only one. Yep.
So do you know much about the Burrillville situation, on how much taxes they get from
I
their-
do not.
What?
I do not.
Okay. You're looking into it.
Right. All right.
Okay, so the 30,000 does that, and with the 30,000 there, other than the 30,000, I haven't done the math, but does it get you?
So
does it
that
get you back on track
will
too?
start getting us back on track. Next year, based on the spreadsheet that should be in your book, I'd be looking at 71,000, then 50 for a couple of years, then back to the 53.
Okay,
And obviously next year is our full revaluation, so the expense of that is entirely 100% on the town. So right now, I'm guesstimating that that's going to cost us $340,000. Based on the numbers that we've put into the restricted account, we should cover that. But I'm not sure if that number will come at 340, 370, I mean, whatever. So once we finally get that number, then I may make adjustments down the road.
so one fundamental problem we seem to have right now is that we only have one vendor in the state.
No. So currently, there's 3 revaluation companies in the northeast area.
Oh, okay.
So there's Vision, Northeast Appraisal, which is actually based out of Warwick, Rhode Island. And there is another company called Cole, Layer, and Trumbull, also known as CLT. And for those playing at home, I actually started my revaluation career with CLT way back in the day. They're based they have a office out of Connecticut, but the main corporate office is actually out of Ohio, but they do Northeast appraisals. They used to be 25% in the state of Rhode Island. I believe they're down to 1 client, so I'm not sure how heavily they're bidding in the state, but there's still a firm out there that do bid.
Okay, for some reason I thought that there was only one player left. Okay, good. Let's hope we get some bids.
Where's Vision based in?
Vision, their corporate office used to be Northborough. It's now Hudson, I believe. There's actually another company called Patriot. They're out of Massachusetts, but they have some sort of agreement with Northeast Appraisal that they do not bid in Rhode Island. So I'm not sure if that's going to remain or not. Northeast Appraisal actually uses Patriot software, so there's some type of partnership there.
I asked you this several years ago. How many taxable properties do you have as far as residential and commercial?
I do. We have roughly 8,500.
That's combined?
That's combined everything, yeah. We have 5,000 single-family homes.
So we have grown in the last decade.
Yeah.
More houses and businesses.
Yeah, we have 5,000 single-family homes in the town, so that's the majority of our tax base.
Do you have any idea how many new homes will be coming in the next year?
This past year, I believe I put in the tax roll, don't quote me, but I think 22 new homes. And projected, there's some pretty good subdivisions coming online. One's near the school, I believe that's 14 lots, but, so, we're still building pretty well, and there's also another subdivision that's off of Hanley or Massey. That's several lots, so there's a good amount of development going on right now.
Is this more than the other years past?
I would say yes. This year, one of the discussions that I'll be bringing forth to the budget committee that I normally do, and I'll update you throughout the process, is the growth of the town. So that's the number that you end up dividing into the budget to get to your tax rate. Typically, that growth, the last couple of years has been 0.5%, so not a lot of growth. This year, with the casino coming online, some significant private residences being built, the Longplex, and the casino's tangible property, this year you're going to have significant growth. That's probably going to be 3 to 4%.
And am I right on the Longplex, like right now, they're not open yet, but once they get a occupancy permit, or when they are scheduled to open, then we'll get the full amount? Or are
Right.
they completely done? I remember talking about this last year, that we weren't getting the full assessment because the construction job wasn't complete, but that should
Right.
materialize this year?
So the way that construction process works is December 31st of each year is the date of assessment. So last year, December 31st, the Longplex may have been, say, 30% complete. This year, December 31st, they're probably pretty close to 85%. So we'll assess them at 85% of their construction cost, more or less. When they get their CO issued, that's when we issue a supplemental bill based on the market value of the facility,
As soon as they open?
as soon as they get a CO. Correct.
Is that
It's the
based
same.
on the revenue, like a
No.
apartment building, or is that based on the structure?
That's based on the construction cost structure. Yeah, we don't, the only revenue that we really take a look at would be on income-producing properties, commercial properties, office buildings.
Okay.
That really would be the assessed value, would be the construction cost on it.
And
It's not
something
it's
like
not
that.
fair. It's-
Yeah, because it's a unique
It's
property.
what it actually costs to build it, so it's.
Right.
I got one question. So last year, Dave, the casino started to come online, and I wasn't on the committee and didn't pay too much attention to all of it, but some of the value of the real estate that would go into the denominator of the calculation, some of that got into that denominator last year.
Correct.
And in your estimation, and some of it's obviously in this number here, that you
Right.
just roughly quoted at 3 to 4% total.
Right.
So in your estimation of the whole casino project, like, did a third of it get taken last year? We're going to take 2/3 of it this year, or just
So-
roughly on the casino itself?
Right, so the way that works is last year, I believe that at year end, we had a value on that property of roughly 18 million. The final value on that is just around 64, 65 million. But
So-
keep in mind that also during this past year, when they opened in September, one of the numbers that I'll give you at some point for the revenue is the prorated taxes. So when they opened, we issued a prorated tax similar to the Longplex, what we'll end up doing with the Longplex. And last year, I believe, typically we estimate prorated taxes, 70,000, 75,000. Last year was 300-ish, and we're just over that number with the casino supplemental bill and other supplemental bills. So that was kind of a one-year deal. So this year, when I come back with my prorated number, it's not going to be 300 again, because obviously the bulk of that was a $50 million swing on the casino.
So the proration is now going to be into the denominator instead of it being a revenue?
Not to the denominator, no, because you treat proration as revenue.
Not quite sure I followed, but that's okay. I'll catch you offline sometime.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we'll have further
Yeah. I'll catch you next
conversations
time.
on this here.
That stuff always interests me. Any other questions?
No?
Okay, great. We can move on now to, well, that was the item we added. I called it 12.5 on my sheet. The item number 13, discussion of motor vehicle phase-out. And this was an item that that the assessor sent to Jan, and Jan, I believe, forwarded to the secretary, and I think it went out to everybody. And my memory is that I requested that it be photocopied and produced. Does everyone have it? Or it could be here in this pile if it's not. It's in the binder? Awesome. Thank you. And that would be toward the back, I assume?
Yes.
Revenue.
Very last tab.
Thank you. Jan? Okay, here it is, motor vehicle phase out. We have 25 minutes until 10. Still a lot of material to get through, so take it away, Dave. Try to move.
Okay, so the motor vehicle phase out, the memo that you have in front of you, or you should have in front of you, there was a little bit of discussion about rumors and such about the motor vehicle phase out stalling. The state obviously has some holes, deficits to fill. So one of the rumors out there was that they may slow down or stop the phase out. In the governor's budget that was released today, it continues, not exactly at the same rate that it was supposed to, but not at a point that is going to impact the town of Tiverton necessarily. So that being said, right now, this memo had estimated that the local excise tax, because of this phase out, is going to decrease from $1.4 million down to 1.35, with a state reimbursement of approximately 361. For the time being, I would probably still use those numbers, but I'll get a little bit more information from the state and see how that discussion progresses as far as the phase out. Those numbers may be slightly modified. However, just keep in mind that the motor vehicle phase out is a wash between local excise tax that we bill out to people and state reimbursement. So it's almost kind of like if we get less locally, the state's going to make up the difference. So as it stands right now, I would stand with this number, the 1.35, as far as the local excise tax number, which will be part of your revenue number, because that is a fixed number, meaning that there's a fixed tax rate, I should say. So that's the only tax rate. Based on the old phase-out state statute, the motor vehicle tax rate is a fixed number, and that doesn't get adjusted. 1914.
Did it change, or was it always that?
Nope. That's been 1914.
I'm just getting
Yeah.
by 7 cents. Okay, so that's the number as we get downstream. Historically, you come before the budget committee at some point around March 1st, somewhere around there, and you usually present what I remember is 2 critical numbers. One is the denominator, 1.8 billion or whatever that number is. And the other number we usually hound you for is 1.378 million, whatever this card number is.
Right.
And so this is the number
Right.
we're talking about now.
Right.
Those are the 2
Right.
numbers we usually hound you for.
Right. So typically, the motor vehicle number, I'll have a lot earlier than real estate numbers. The state of Rhode Island generates a export to the assessor's office on all of the motor vehicles that's located in town. We value those out, the ones that need valuing. A lot of them do come through with a native book value on them, but some do not. Sometimes it's 500 to 700 vehicles I have to manually price. So that's a bit of a process, but typically by the end of February, I'll have a pretty good number on what the local number is going to be as far as what's accessible. The phase-out's a little bit different part of the equation, but if all goes according to plan and they stay at the 85% that they're supposed to be this year of book value, I'll have a good number for you. The real estate intangible number is a little bit later in the process because we have a personal exemption deadline of March 15th. So people will still be applying for personal exemptions up to that date. And that's also the date that tangible businesses, that's their deadline to report to me. So there's still a lot of work to be done up to that date. And then obviously, because the filing deadline is March 15th, you're not going to get the number right away. So you'll have to give me a couple weeks for the process all of that information.
Is the tangible a third number we get from you, or that comes out of the same calculation? 'Cause
It
it's
comes out of the same-
rate as the real estate?
Correct.
So it comes out
So
of the same calculation?
tangibles and real estate is the same bucket.
Okay, I thought so, all right. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this topic / this memo that Mr. Robert was prepared for us, which was very nice? Any more questions, or any, I'm sure we'll be revisiting it, at least on the pointed amounts.
Well, thank you for information.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Dave.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next on the agenda is tax collector's budget, number 14.
At this point, I'll recuse myself.
Okay. Just, can the minutes reflect? He just wants to be careful.
Oh, okay.
The minutes should reflect that Mr. Souza recused himself from this discussion. Yeah, there is a form.
Yeah.
At some point, Joe, you,
Recusal form, I don't see it here, so I have to get Nancy to.
whatever,
All right,
just, yeah,
I'll
it needs to
make
be
a-
taken care of. Just, we want to get that to Sherry, and we'll get it attached to the minutes. Hi, Tony, how are you? Do you know everyone?
Some new faces.
Okay, so this is Sherry. This is Tony,
Nice
a
to meet
tax
you, too.
collector. Any other new faces that I need to introduce? or-
I've seen her when I've gone in to pay my taxes.
Okay, great. So, that being said, I will give you the floor as I look for your budget. I'll give you the floor.
So, do you want to go line by line?
Whatever comforts you. Some people go line by line. Dave focused on, items of change or items he thought were important. So whatever kind of floats your boat. How's that?
Like, the first line item is my salary, department head salary.
Sure thing.
I'm sure that, there is a significant change in there that you may have questions for. We can discuss that as after I go down each line item, or do you want to pause there? The next line item is the Ask Me salary. We have a full-time clerk and a part-time clerk that we share the clerk with the assessor's office. She goes back and forth in her workflow. And their salary was level funded because they are in contract negotiations right now. The longevity is for both of the clerks. I pay half of the longevity for the part-time and then the full one for the full-time clerk. Postage is pretty much, well, it's self-explanatory as fact that it's postage. But we do use a lot of stamps in the office. We not only mail notices, like if, a taxpayer doesn't pay the correct amount, we'll send them a notice and let them know what it is. But the majority of it is delinquent notices. And I did do a quick analysis just to let you know that, like, after the October quarter, we mailed over 1,000 motor vehicle delinquent notices. So the postage, the envelopes, the paper, and I didn't know how to quantify the ink and the labor, but the hard cost that I knew about, we spent almost $1,000 in supplies and postage to mail out the delinquent notices. Well, within that time period that we collected on our motor vehicles, we collected $103,000 of people that forgot to pay the motor vehicle tax, and the delinquent notice reminded them or they were blocked at the DMV. So they're really helpful, but it takes paper and takes postage and manpower to get those notices out. So that's what the postage account is primarily used for. Telephone, we have 2 lines. We have a fax line and a regular line that goes into the office. Consulting services is the fee that we pay to the collection agency. So accounts that we're having trouble collecting on, motor vehicles that are 2 years older, we will turn over to the collection agency and they attempt to collect on them. If they do collect on the account once it's been turned over, we have to pay them a 20% fee of what they collected. So that's where that line item comes from. And then this year, they don't collect on every single account that I turn over, but this year in 2018,
I turned over $48,000 worth of past due accounts. Now, again, they do not collect on 100%. Some of them go on payment plans, some of them they don't collect at all. But if we were to collect on every account that I have already turned over to Rossi, that fee would be $9,700. So that's why, and I'm already at 62% of that line item this year. So I am actively trying to collect on accounts and get, you know, the collection rate as high as we can get it. And the result is that sometimes we use a collection agency and the fee is greater and greater. We have cut that fee and I've run short sometimes. So this year we, again, leveled it, funded at $5,000. The supplies and miscellaneous are basically the ink toner, paper, envelopes, everything we use for the office. Software maintenance is, we use another module of Vision Government Solutions. David uses the assessor package, we use the collection package, so that fee covers their maintenance program. And the last line item in the budget is the tax bills and postage, which is a huge expense each year to mail out the tax bills and produce them. We do use the same company that is our software, which is Vision Government Solutions. And the reason why we do that is we've had great success. Because they maintain our software, we can produce on our tax bills credits and also if there are past due balances, so it makes it crystal clear to the taxpayer what they actually owe. And they have the ability to go online and look at their tax bills and see that. So that is an expensive line item, but it's been very, very good to use the same company, and there's many benefits of that. So tax sale, we usually do separately. Do you want me to roll right into it?
Well, let's just ask the question. We'll stick with yours for a minute. Does anyone have any questions on the, for Tony Lynn on the first section, the tax
I just have
collection?
a couple. Are we able to, are there fines for people being late? Because you said you're sending out all of these delinquent notices. Can we
collect,
recoup?
well, we do collect penalties. Some people call it penalties, some people call it interest. It's one and the same for anyone that is late. And that is 12% per annum, but it does go back to July 1st. So anyone that is late does have to pay the interest. I will say, I don't know if anyone has noticed and anyone has been late with the DMV, but the DMV's latest thing is if you are blocked, which we block you for tax purposes, they no longer are even mailing their registrations. So you won't even get a registration renewal from the DMV if you have a tax block. So our delinquent notices that are letting the taxpayer know that they're late and they have a tax block have been, hugely effective. And the taxpayers are grateful to it because they would be driving around with an unregistered vehicle.
So you don't charge any processing fees for this extra work that can be assessed to this as well?
No late fee for the processing of the delinquent notices, just the interest.
Just a different kind of question. How long do they stay delinquent? I'm trying to ask.
There is a 10-year, so your account can remain on a tax rolls for a period of 10 years before they get abated because they are deemed uncollectible.
Okay.
But you would be blocked at the registry once you miss your October quarter, you're blocked at the registry, and that block does not get lifted until we manually lift it. And now with the DMV's new system, it also blocks your license. It's always blocked registrations, and I think it blocks other activities that you do at the DMV. So that's the biggest push that will get people to come in, is either when they can't do something at the DMV or they get their notice. And then after the 2 years, if you haven't renewed your registration, then those are the accounts I usually turn over to the collection agency.
Then they're usually, is in the general case that people then eventually end up paying? Is that general?
Usually unless they move out of town. So if they move out of town and say, I'm never coming back to Tiverton, they might choose to not pay their bill. But what surprisingly happens is a lot of them come back to Tiverton and then say, oh, I have a bill from 2004, not 2004, but that's too old, but that I haven't paid. And then we still end up collecting it with all that back interest. So we don't get rid of it until it's past the period of collection.
And is there a place where that money then shows up in the revenue that we see for money that's been collected, does it go back into the general fund or
All the
into your
prior
fund?
year collections go directly into the general fund.
Okay.
Would you say a majority of this is motor vehicle, or is it residential?
Majority of the delinquent notices. This particular quarter, we're working on the real estate delinquent notices, and I anticipate they'll be somewhere in the 300.
300
delinquent notice
homes?
marks.
300 homes.
So that's a lot less than the motor vehicles.
300 homes.
Out of the 5,000.
Yes.
And is,
That will have missed their quarter, and so
That's
many
by
people will
quarter.
be so grateful, and they'll say, I can't believe it slipped my mind, thank you for sending the notice. And then some people just, you know, they were aware that they were late and just didn't have the funds.
so that's for the quarter. How many people do you have that are like years, like that you are actually sending out to the delinquent?
Well, we tax sale a property once it's 2 years delinquent, so that cleans up most of the real estate. So we wouldn't mail anything, because that would either have been tax saled, brought current, or sold at tax sale. But so once we get done with the current quarter delinquent notices, we'll go back and start processing the prior years. Prior year delinquencies have already had multiple notices that note, but we just want to keep sending them the colorful pieces of paper that we send in the mail and say, remember you owe your taxes. So we will do those.
How many homes do you are headed to the tax sale?
When I initially start the procedure in July, the list is close to 200. And then just the, like the 90-day notices that go out, the number will drastically reduce. And as the tax sale process goes on, it's close to like 20 that may actually go to tax sale. So most people find the funds. You only have to pay like this year was your 2016 balance to be removed from the tax sale. So you only have to pay the year, that's 2 years.
You still have the current year coming up, so it's almost like you can't catch up. But they can make a payment arrangement, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's what we tell people, pay whatever you can and keep chipping away at it. Because the tax sale fees alone are a lot of money. So on top of paying your delinquent tax and all of the interest, now you're hit with a bunch of fees.
And the interest continues to accrue, correct?
Yes.
I'd just like to note, it seems like we've moved, and that's fine, we've moved into the next agenda item, tax sale. And that's fine, I just wanted to note for the purposes of the meeting structure that we're into tax sale, that's fine. Keep going, keep going. Okay.
Did you say you wanted to have an opportunity to justify the 10% raise? Do you feel like you wanted to say something? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's the reason I'm sitting here.
Okay.
I decided something had to be done after I learned that there was a fairly significant discrepancy in the salary of this particular department head compared to others. So what I did, and in the backup materials, there's a little, it explains it. I converted everything to hourly rate and compared them. And I thought that it's really not tenable to continue with that kind of a difference between salaries of people in a similar position. I mean, it's true that some departments, whatever the responsibilities or the scope of responsibilities or the, whatever it may be different, but this was way too much. So my proposal is to try and bring that in line over 2 years instead of doing it all at once. So this is the first of 2 10% increases that I propose.
So it'd be 10% this year and 10%.
Correct.
Thank you, that explains it, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was an increase in hours, it wasn't clear, so thank you for the clarification. Any other comments for the tax, or questions or comments for the tax collector, either on the, her budget items or the tax sale? Okay, thank you, Tony Lynn. You are excused.
Tax sale line item, there's no,
What's that?
the tax sale line item.
Well, we, Jennifer got into it, and everyone okay with the tax sale item?
Yeah.
I think so.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for coming in. All right, now.
Did you pass 15?
Yes.
Is that the tax sale, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we just, Jennifer asked a question which really got us into it. That's why I interrupted and started, and said for agenda purposes, we're now into item 15. midstream. Did you have a comment on 15?
Well, just
we can do that.
touring the DPW, I saw a few trucks that weren't listed on the tax sale that should go. This is what I was talking about. These were trucks that were previously replaced.
Ah,
This one's when people didn't pay.
Right, and they have to,
Delinquent tax.
Oh, this is for houses.
That's for houses, right? We talked about that at DPW. That's
Okay.
like.
What am I
When
thinking?
all the vehicles.
Never mind.
Not just DPW, right? That would be like anything that got.
Yeah, I was sitting over
seized.
there, I wasn't paying close enough attention.
Which I don't know if we talked about that, because I'm kind of interested in that one too. I don't
That's
know if we
right.
talked about
I'm
that
thinking
last
about
year,
the
because that would be
auction.
like
So you're thinking excess property
seizures,
sale.
Yeah,
vehicles out of use.
Okay,
I don't
my brain's
know.
out of gear. Let me
What
get
is
back
that
here.
fault? What is it? co-
Newport does a lot, but.
Must be getting late, yeah.
just asked a question.
No, I did, I started.
All right.
So that's another night.
Okay, so I'd like to say we're done with item 15, discussion of tax sale, which we can move on to now is approval of minutes from January 7th, 2019. Those minutes were distributed by email, and they've also been distributed in paper form. They were distributed by email about a day ago, I think?
2 days, a day and a half, something like that.
I'm gonna be selfish here and just ask Sherry, so the ones that I read, are the ones that you sent out, right?
Yeah, 7th,
Okay,
10th,
so I'm not
and
gonna read them again,
Okay,
which is lucky me.
all right.
So, we have 5 more minutes until the witching hour. I'd like to try to get through this agenda, we can move quickly. Does people need a minute to read these, or has anyone already pre-read them, or?
I need this January 12th.
I'm gonna,
January 7th, 12th is just the site visit. It's
Oh,
real
okay,
simple.
okay, I saw that,
Here.
okay.
Here it is, right here.
No, that's okay.
There you go. Just so you have it.
well, we can certainly discuss it, but I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from January 7th, 2019, January 10th, 2019, and January 12th, 2019.
Okay.
Need a second.
Pose.
Is there a second?
Second it,
All
Jay,
right, Jay.
assuming
Oh,
everybody
wait,
read
wait,
them.
wait, wait, wait
Oh.
a minute.
Just, there was a typo in
Which one?
January 10th,
10th? Okay, we're not.
on page 3, that it just makes it confusing, I think, to people.
Hold on, let me get to it. Sorry, they're all.
Who seconded it?
Jay.
Jay?
Hold on, we're not there yet. Oh,
Sure.
So when we take them like a lump sum like that, like we're gonna approve 7, 10, and 12 all at once, I wasn't present at 7, so
Oh.
I abstained from that vote. So we have to take them individually,
Okay,
correct?
good point, and that would be, gonna be true next door here, too.
okay.
All right, then I'll
You want to draw that and
I'll
just,
withdraw my motion
So
and just motion to approve for January 7th, 2019.
okay, second?
Second that.
Jay, second,
Jay
okay.
seconded it.
So a motion on the floor to approve
January
January 7th, and a second by Jay. Now, I'm going to stop for a minute. Is there any discussion? Or does anyone need another minute?
On that one.
Okay, I'm going to ask all those in favor? Opposed?
I abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay.
Okay,
So
abstain.
just, we get that vote? So,
Yeah,
2 abstentions.
there he is.
and Brendan McNally abstained.
So we can do the 10th and the 12th together? All right. All right.
So Deb, what was wrong with your?
Motion to approve the minutes from January 10th, 2019, and January 12th, 2019.
Okay, so what was the 10th?
Need
Yeah,
a second.
I second.
hold on 1 second.
We got a
know-
motion and a second, now we got discussion.
Okay, motion.
Slow down.
Who made the motion?
Joe.
Joe again, and then you seconded it.
Seconded that one.
Okay.
Top where it says resolution, the second line. Keep all seven resolutions for, it says no. It could be not, it could be now.
Hold on one second.
It's now.
It's probably just a typo.
It's just a
Yeah,
typo.
Yeah, let me just see.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth Hollenbeck read each committee resolutions. You're talking about there in B?
And just that second line down.
Second line down.
So 7 resolutions for no.
No.
Oh, yeah, it was, yeah, okay.
For now with
Yep,
the.
it was for now. Sorry, I just needed to read it
Okay.
again for a minute. All right,
Any other,
any other
comments?
changes?
And then just down under scheduling, I know this is picky, but I just think that people can misinterpret.
Come on, honey, I got it.
Scheduling of site visits, it says, suggested that Mr. Rogers add next each site, and I think it's like, add for each site a short bullet of problems.
Beck suggests that Mr. Rogers add.
Next to each site.
Yeah, that's what it was supposed to be, add next to each site. So did you want to insert something different, or, okay. So I'm just gonna add next to each site. I read through these things like 5 times. Yeah, I know, it helps. All right. Anything else?
Any other comments? Okay, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the approval?
Just make the motion
With the amendments.
with the amendments.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so the motion was, I'm
To
gonna,
approve January 10th,
With-
2019, January 12th, 2019, as amended.
thank you, Joe.
Second.
Who was second? As amended. Okay, we had some discussion, so I'm gonna call for a vote. All those in favor? We had one abstention, which was Brendan McNally. Yeah. Oh. Great, okay, awesome. Now, I wanna flip the page and get this thing so we can go home. Administrative items. I have, I'm on item number 19, there's an A, B, and a C. Computer turned off. I have a sheet, I just want to give people a quick snapshot into what this might look like next week. The administrator has provided to me, I hope I have the latest file in here. 114, that was a couple days ago. I think this is it. Okay, January. Oh, just give me one moment, please. Where are we here? Oh, here it is. Okay, so what I have down for January 24th, next Thursday, is the DPW. And what I have down, well, I guess I should first of all say, for this Saturday, the notice that has been published for Saturday, January 19th, is the Senior Center at 9 a.m. for a site visit. And then I have for next Thursday, as a primary testimony from the DPW chief. And I also have the town clerk coming in with a small caveat that I'm gonna work through with her. She said that she usually comes in, which I found kind of odd. She usually comes in after the council has voted. But I find that kind of, and I know she's not part of that vote, but I found it odd that she was usually coming in March. I found that kind of odd, that late in the process. Yeah, and like I found that odd. But anyway, what I was gonna propose is, the town clerk has agreed to come next week. I was gonna propose that that Nancy run through all of her items. She usually does a litany of small items, 45 minutes worth. We go through them all. If, when she submits her final budget, 63 days before, whenever that is, I'm gonna suggest to her that if she sees changes coming, that, she submit them, instead of 63 days before, submit them a week earlier or whatever, come before us, or, just come before us then, and at that time frame. I don't really want to drag it past that, because we got business to do then, we got work to do. But I'm gonna try to work that with her, and we just talk about the line items that change. I mean, if she's only gonna talk about 3 line items that change at the last minute because of something, that's fine, so, and we can talk about them then. So hopefully we can break the back of it, of all those small accounts, next week, and then we'll give her the courtesy of coming back in if she needs to, right there in that first week of March.
Good
as
idea,
needed,
Jeff.
Okay? And I've got more information, and then just for reference, Jan has the senior center director down for January 31st. And I've got a phone call in from the school committee chair that I need to return, and I've just been too busy to return, but I do have a call in from the chair, and it's a scheduling issue, so I need to get on top of that. But the senior center is scheduled in here for January 31st. So for now, that's the foreseeable future, and I will work on, as I usually do, I will work on the magic to fill this thing up. I think the schools had requested to come in on February 20.
Oh, so wait.
I think it was in February. Sally,
Yeah.
could you help me with that? I've just got so much going through my head lately. The school committee had requested, Mr. Larkin was trying to work with me, and I just haven't gotten to return his call.
I'm not sure what they decided either, because he mentioned something about 8 o'clock Saturday morning, and I knew we were going to the senior center, so that would never work out for a site visit.
Right.
Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, I did, and I own the
getting
phone
it
call,
now.
and I just have not been able to get to it. It's on my voicemail.
I was just trying to
But-
figure out where.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
and
better just chat with him, because I'm not sure.
I need to, maybe,
The last thing he said was,
maybe when I'm driving north in the morning, I'll,
Jeff,
call him.
he did say that January 19th work for us to do the site visit tour?
Oops, that's not gonna work, obviously. But I know that there was another reason too, for the meeting. The school committee has some sort of a meeting.
We have a meeting Saturday morning, 9 to 12. Workshop, yeah, this Saturday.
Okay, I might have botched that up. Okay, I
It's all right, just
apologize.
talk to
Publicly
him.
apologize for that. I just
It's all right. You can
couldn't
work
get
it
to
out.
all the messages.
There's so many things. It's all right.
Okay, anyway, DPW next Thursday, site, senior center Saturday morning. Next Thursday, DPW and town clerk. And then, and I'm gonna do my magic to, to start filling in like I've been doing.
I have a quick question. So when the DPW comes next week, next Thursday, will there be discussion about the capital requests? So in other words, we've got the second kind of the 5-year plan that's in here that has the couple $1 million worth of stuff. Do we want to hit that then? Because there's line items within DPW, police department, fire department.
We usually do, anything that pertains to the DPW.
At least the things that, pertain to DPW.
You know, police cars and fire department, obviously, and fire.
So that's a good point, Brendan.
Good. So we're all ready, and Jan and the DPW
Well,
head.
they won't be, but we will.
It's a good
Just
point.
being smart, because
I mean, we
half
would
asleep and I need a good laugh. Let's get out of here.
Well,
Motion to adjourn.
no, hold on. I got one more thing. If I
come
could
on.
just hold off the motion to adjourn. I'd like to ask Ruth to either remind me or just don't let us forget to reach out to Jan to make Brendan's point that we intend to address the capital items associated with each department. Is that accurately stated?
Yeah, and that would be normal. Absent
Right.
this 5-year thing, each department head would say, here's what I'm looking for in
Right.
terms of
Yeah.
capital
Okay.
things.
So I just don't want to forget that, and that's the
So we'll
type
get
of thing that
DPW capital items.
I will forget
When we make that
after 4 days of skiing and a lot of snow. I will forget that. So if you could just
gotta
remind me,
know,
but we
yeah.
can't forget that,
I
to
know.
reach out to Jan.
I got it.
Okay, I'm sure everybody wants to bail out, so.
No, I have one more important thing to talk about, so.
Well, if you're gonna get down to C, I was gonna ask you the same thing.
Yeah, that's it.
If we're gonna discuss it tonight, it might take a little time. If not, then let's do it early on our next meeting.
Okay. Okay, our next meeting starts out with DPW. So why don't we do that? Can we also, let's make a motion to, I think it makes sense. You think it's gonna take some time? You see this as being a
Make a
lengthy?
motion, Jay?
I have a quick way.
Yeah,
of handling it,
because
You have a quick way?
here's what's gonna happen. It's happened ever since there's been a town council meeting and a budget committee.
but- Okay,
As you get towards items that are gonna be adversarial, or however you wanna call it, you have to have some ground rules about how we're gonna conduct this. That's coming up soon. So if we're gonna do it, we need to do it sort of towards the beginning of the meeting, get it out of the way, vote on it, and do whatever we're gonna do.
okay. So what I'd like to do is ask Sherry and Ruth, either of you, both of you, to make sure that when I do the next agenda, that this item 19C is up near the top. Don't let me forget, I'll forget this. Yeah, is up near the top. And then what I'd like to do, and so that we can take Jay's advice and deal with it when we're fresh and knock it out first. And if we do it while we're fresh, hopefully it won't be too long, because right now it could drag on forever. I agree. And it's mainly just deciding what we're gonna vote here, and if we do vote early, what do those votes mean, and that kind of thing. So it's important, and we shouldn't do it half asleep. So I just wanna make sure, the next agenda has that up near the top. And Jay
We
said
got it,
that's a
we got
good
it now.
idea.
Quick
So I
question.
just wanna make sure, so if you see the agenda come across as a draft, it's not there, you need to ding me again, okay? And then I think legally, we need to do we have to take a motion to like, the solicitor said we take a motion to, we vote to like move that to the next agenda, right?
Jay,
Is that what
why
we
don't
did?
Yeah, I think we need to do that.
So I'll take a motion to move 19C. We've definitely addressed 19A and B. I make a motion to
Motion to continue
continue 19C to the next agenda.
to our next meeting, which would be
The 19th?
the
19th. No.
24th.
24th of March. All right, 24th.
Do I have a motion?
That was my motion.
Thank you.
And I just wanted, before we adjourn, I have one quick.
We're not going to adjourn, we're going to
Okay.
vote first.
Okay,
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Okay, so next item is closing remarks. Ruth has a closing remark. Look at that.
Oh, it's nothing big, but last year we missed the senior center date or something, and she was left high and dry there. I just want to make sure.
I was the only one that went.
Yeah, or Jay was the only one there, because there was in attendance. I think we talked about this last week, like,
So,
we gotta
I wasn't on the
you-
committee thing.
so if you want an account of who's going to be there, we sometimes do that. Should we do that?
I will not.
Okay,
I'll be there.
Skiing, I won't be
Sherry,
there.
you take the names, right?
So we'll be, there'll be enough of us
So
there.
Brendan's gonna be there, sorry,
Jay,
It's like 4.
Jay.
I'll be
Actually,
there.
I got a very good tour.
You're gonna be
You got the
there,
special
Ruth,
treatment.
and you're the Deb.
I think Jennifer Rashley will be there as well.
I'm going. You know, just while we're on that subject, several years ago, we appropriated money to replace the shingles on the back of that building. The money was appropriated and the work never got done. And when I checked into it, I was told, oh yeah, it's gonna be done, it's gonna be done. And the money wasn't encumbered, so it just rolled back into the general fund, so. The back of the building was probably the worst part. I mean, we did the windows, we did the roof, but the shingles on the back of the building were in pretty tough shape, so it'd be something to look at while we're there.
Okay.
Wait,
Any other closing comments?
You said you did that work, right?
No, we
Oh.
appropriated the money, the town approved the money, but the council never went out to bid.
Okay.
They put it off, and then it went back into, like everything else they did, nothing, so.
Joe, did you say you were be there this weekend?
Yeah, I'll be there.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who's the second?
I'll make.
Jennifer Gosselin.
Who's the second? You say, or second yourself?
First, I'll second, whatever.
No, I said I'll
I'll
make.
third. Let's get out of here.
Joe Souza